Okay, welcome to the June 28th Village of Buchanan Board of Trustees Workshop Meeting. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right, this evening, we have a discussion on the CHOP relocation, and with us this evening, we have Cynthia Knox, who's the CEO, and John Smith is here with us too. And CHOP is Caring for the Hungry and Homeless of Peekskill. I've asked them to come in because there were some questions about the location and there were just different concerns. So Cynthia is going to do a presentation for us. Thank you for coming tonight, Cynthia.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay? Is that picking up?
Yeah, it's picking
okay,
up.
Great. Thank you so much for the invitation to come and speak with you this evening. Really appreciate the invitation. And I wanted to reintroduce John Smith, who is the vice chair of our board and a Buchanan resident. So what I wanted to do was spend a couple minutes just talking to you a little bit about what we do currently, and then talk a little bit about the proposed relocation, and then if it works for how you handle your meetings, have people ask whatever questions they're interested in. Mm-hmm. So I want to start by sort of just creating a framework for who we are at this point in time in the history of the organization. We believe that every individual has the right to safe and affordable housing and healthy, nutritious food. And so we work to bring that vision to fruition by providing services and programs to alleviate hunger and homelessness and Peekskill and the surrounding communities, including Buchanan, Verplanck, Montrose, and the surrounding areas. We do that with an incredibly dedicated staff of approximately 30 part-time and full-time employees. And the employment positions range from our client care workers who work on the floor of the Jan Peek House shelter with our clients, getting our clients basic needs, food, clothing, hygiene products, and perhaps most importantly, a listening ear. We also have a team of 9 social workers and case managers who work with the clients, providing the services that I'm going to talk about in our 5 different programs in a few minutes. We have an operating budget of about $3 million. Don't get too excited. A lot of that is rental subsidies that goes for our off-site housing programs. And in 2021, we served over 60,000 individuals, which was an over 300% increase in the pre-pandemic level of who we served. And as we'll discuss, a lot of that was driven by the food insecurity that we're seeing throughout the United States. So our programs fall into 2 primary buckets. We have preventative services, which includes Fred's Pantry, which is our food pantry, community food pantry, providing healthy and nutritious food. And you can see on the left-hand slide there. Oh, I'm sorry. I should tell you when to move the slide. Mike, if you can move the... Oh, it's you. Okay, Marcus. Thank you. If you could move to the next slide. Thank you. You can see it should not be the next slide. There we go. Yep. You had it. Yes. Okay. I skipped over because I was just busy talking. Okay. Thank you. So you see on the left-hand side, there's a very long line of food insecure families waiting for food from Fred's Pantry. These are people who are a couple paychecks away from not being able to feed their families. And as I'm going to get into the numbers in a little bit, the numbers are staggering, and they include Buchanan residents. Right now, we have 7 families from Buchanan who are registered with Fred's Pantry, comprising 26 individuals. 2 of those 7 households are senior citizens, and we're very proud that we can provide that food security to them. Our next preventive services program is our Turning Point program. That's a permanent supportive housing program for chronically homeless individuals living with a disability. And I'm going to go in a couple minutes a little more detail about exactly what that means. In the next photo there, you see our Turning Point case manager, who's a social worker, Robbie, who is also a Buchanan resident. Our next preventive services program, you see a RISE apartment. RISE is our Rehousing and Supportive Environments program. That's a collaborative program that we operate to provide services to domestic violence survivors and their families. And these families live in their own housing, and again, I'll describe the services in a little bit more detail. You may be more familiar with our immediate need transitional housing and services. Those are the programs and the services that we operate out of the Jan Peak House. I am terrible when I'm not looking at the slides. Thank you, Marcus. And you see on the far right-hand side a photograph from a veteran who is in our veterans program. I love this photograph because he is so dignified in this photograph. And we are incredibly proud to be able to say that since 2015 we have served over 250 veterans, and these are individuals who have served us and we give back to them. HUD estimated that in 2019 there were 37,000 homeless veterans, and that 1.4 million additional veterans were at risk of homelessness. Next to that wonderful photograph of our veteran client is a Department of Social Services client at Jan Peak House. This is a former resident named Kenny. This is Kenny on his move-out day, and you can see that Kenny is just beaming because he is moving forward with his independence into his own apartment with his new laptop. The third immediate need program that we operate is our emergency services program. Next slide, please. Now, with Fred's Pantry, we had just a paradigm shift when the pandemic hit. Prior to the pandemic, we operated once a week on Saturdays and saw probably 95 families a week on a busy week. When the pandemic struck, all bets were off. We went as high as 550. We went to a two-day-a-week food pantry. And as I said, when the pandemic struck, we just had this paradigm shift where we had always been focused on healthy, nutritious food. But we've been operating out of a charity model because that's the predominant model in the food pantry world. It's like you get food donated and given to you, and then you get the food to the people. And you're not thinking so much about the type of food, but you're thinking about getting the food to people. And when the pandemic hit, we just said, oh my gosh, we have to make sure that the food that we're getting to people strengthens their immune system. So with the help of some funders, such as the Episcopal Charities, we were able to pivot and start operating as a farm to Fred's Pantry. So now we source a lot of local food, including a lot of fresh vegetables. We purchase from local retail stores, really like healthy food that can be prepared, food that helps families and especially children thrive and grow. Next slide, please. Some of the photos that you'll see in this slide are examples of some of the locally sourced food. On the upper left-hand corner is a photograph of ground beef from the local Hemlock Hills farm. I don't know if anybody has ever been there, but they have just amazing healthy food, and it's a local farm. And down below that, these pictures of these fresh vegetables. I love these pictures because these vegetables were picked one day from a local farm, and the next day they were on a family's dinner table with all the nutrients that this kind of food has to make people strong. So as I said, we served over 60,000 people in the food pantry in 2021. We thought that the numbers would start going down now that people were back to work and things were opening up. In 2022, we're seeing demand rise back up again. And we project that we're going to serve 30% more in 2022. And we think that what is driving this, because this is anecdotal from what people tell us, the inflation that is impacting all of us, the expiration of child tax credits, and the incredibly high cost of housing. So many, many families are coming to us making the choice to get their food from the food pantry to feed their family so they can pay the rent and put gas in their car to get to work. Next slide, please. Just a little bit of financial information about Fred's Pantry. The budget for Fred's Pantry is about $200,000, and 95% of that comes from private donations. And as you can see in this slide, individual contributions are over 26% of the funding that comes in, and that's really, really important to us because it shows how much local support we have. This is money that comes from individuals living in Peekskill, Buchanan, Montrose, all in this area, because they understand how important this is for the community. Next slide, please. Now, I mentioned that I was going to talk a little bit about the services in some of the preventive programs. Again, our Turning Point program is our permanent supportive housing program for chronically homeless individuals living with a disability. Clients live in their own apartments independently and receive case management services, and those services range from accessing medical, behavioral health services, educational services, part-time employment services, essentially whatever it is that the client needs to stay stably housed, because the goal is to keep people permanently housed. The services can also range to something incredibly basic, and a good example of that is we had an individual who'd been living in a tent for quite some time before he came into the program. So he needed help relearning how to basically housekeep, take care of an apartment, and cook. And the case manager helped him do that because that was part of his journey back to independence and remaining permanently housed. Next slide, please. The RISE program that we operate collaboratively, we operate it with Lifting Up Westchester and My Sister's Place. It's a program where we provide housing services and case management services. Lifting Up Westchester provides employment services, and My Sister's Place provides domestic violence support and counseling. And it's an incredibly successful program. So we have about 30 families in this program who are living independently, regaining safety, independence, and security. Most of our clients in this program obtain and keep employment after 6 to 8 months of coming into the program. And I believe that a program like this just really illustrates the power of bringing skills from different organizations and different places and putting them all together to create the strongest services that you can to help move people forward. Next slide, please. In our veterans program, we work with the Veterans Administration in Montrose, and we provide case management services, helping clients access VA support services and other services, and help them transition to permanent housing. Again, the goal in these programs is to help somebody move forward with independence and remain permanently housed. Next slide, please. In our Jan Peak House, our DSS program, that's a Department of Social Services program where clients come in and they are clients of the Department of Social Services, and they are placed at Jan Peak House. They are residents there, and we provide the case management services, social workers and case managers, to help clients access health care educational services, behavioral services, employment assistance. Again, whatever the services are that an individual needs to regain independence. You come in to a situation like Jan Peak House where something terrible has happened in your life. You are at your lowest point, and our job is to help the person in, sit down with them and say, what's going on? What happened so you ended up homeless? And then start putting the supports in place to work with that person to regain that independence. That's similar to our emergency services program, which used to be different many years ago. You may recall years ago, this was before I got to CHOP about 5 years ago, emergency service clients had to leave the shelter at some really awful time in the morning time. When I came in 2017, I really wasn't clear on why that was the rule. And so we kept it for a little while, and then we started looking at it and saying, well, this doesn't really make any sense. There's no place for them to go at 6 o'clock in the morning, and we can't work with them to help them regain independence if we make them leave. So we stopped doing that probably 4 years ago, but I think a lot of people still remember from that time period. Next slide, please. In our latest audit in 2020, we reported that 85% of our budget goes directly to our programs, as it should. We believe that it's very important. Also, you have to have a strong infrastructure. You have to have a strong finance and operations infrastructure to support good programming, and we believe in that as well. But we are also very mindful that we are stewards of the money that we receive to work with our clients and help them achieve that independence and permanent living. Next slide, please. This is a model of the facility at 1070 Lower South Street. So for those of you who have ever visited 200 North Water Street, you can see it's a very different layout. North Water Street is like this, and if you've ever been inside, it's all cut up in these little, warren-like areas. This gives us the opportunity to do the training and educational programs that we are severely hamstrung from doing now because we simply don't have the space. We also have built into the plans for 1070 Lower South Street to put in a commercial kitchen, because it is our hope that we can develop a culinary arts training program. There are so many restaurants that need help and good employees, so we think that that's good for our clients, and it's good for the local economy. So Mr. Serrano had asked us to put in some current views and aerial shots. So if we drill down on this, I'm going to ask Mr. Smith to come up, because he's the guy on this kind of stuff. I'm the word person. So this is a slide of the current view, and where you see the X is 1070 Lower South Street. For any of you who have been down 1070 Lower South Street, this is right next to Manzer's Landscaping, to give you an idea of where that orientation is. And you can see the McDonald's and the Westchester Diner. Next slide, please. This is an area view that then shows you all the favorite places in Buchanan, particularly my favorite place, Fat Sal's Bar and Grill. So again, you see the red X, and that gives you some visual information about where it's located in relationship to the border of Buchanan. Next slide, please. And then one final slide to again give you a visualization of where 1070 Lower South Street is. And that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions. Again, if you want to drill down on the location, because I know that's something that's very important to you, I would ask John to come up and help me out on that.
Well, Cynthia, you certainly are doing God's work, okay?
Thank you.
Taking care of people that need help. But that was that was a big question, where this was going to be in relation to the Village of Buchanan border. I don't know if you know, like feet-wise, half a mile, quarter mile. It's looking like it's across from that manufacturing facility. Okay, it's before that. It kind of looks like it's before that.
It's 0.8 of a mile from the homeless shelter where it's gonna be.
You have to come to the microphone.
It's 0.8 of a mile from the proposed site to 220 Tate Avenue. That's where I
0.8 of a
live.
mile. Oh, okay. You live on Tate Avenue. Now we know. Okay. All right. I'm sorry?
The pink area farthest to the left, which is across from the McDonald's, I believe, is that going to be utilized as well? Because you have 3 areas marked out. The Manzer property, I see the one next to the Manzer property, then the one all the way to the left, I believe, is next to the gas facility, right? It's across from the diner.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is that going to be utilized as well?
They're in developmental talks to put in a self-storage or some kind of mini warehouse.
Okay, but your facility's the one all the way to the right?
All the way to the right.
Okay, all right, yeah, I didn't know what the 3 markings were, that's all. All right.
Yeah, because
That clarifies
there's
that.
markings there now. There's a sign.
Yeah, I know the property was sold.
And the diner is where in relation to that? To the left.
Right there.
Okay. Okay.
Where it just begins, yeah.
Okay. All right.
And in your facility, I mean, what's it like security-wise? Like, what do you have, what goes on that would facilitate security?
Great question, and one of the things I should have brought with me is we have a pretty extensive list of rules in the shelter, and we are pretty clear with people, like we have them sign for that, and if somebody breaks a major rule, they're out. If it's a minor rule, they go on contract, and the contract says basically, I will observe all the rules, or I understand that I will be kicked out of the shelter. And in terms of actual security, what we do is our client care workers wand every client who comes in, empty pockets, CCWs, check bags, because we want everybody to feel safe in our facility. So it's important to us that we strike that balance between making sure that everybody is safe and not making it be so aggressive that you defeat the purpose of trying to work with people to move them forward.
Very good. Yeah, that sounds good. I just was wondering with the, with emergency calls and stuff in the area. I mean, not that it's going to affect us. I think that falls out of our does that fall out of our fire zone, Sean? That's
Mutual aid.
That's mutual aid,
Yeah.
so.
We have a great relationship with the Peekskill Police Department.
Mhm.
We meet with them quarterly with the chief and his lieutenant. So if there's ever any issues, we talk about them.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of relationship that we like having because, we're all communities. Buchanan may be over here, but it's not that far from Peekskill. And we are all, in this corner of northern Westchester together, and everybody wants to have a good quality of life. I live in Peekskill and have lived in Peekskill since 1992. So I want the shelter to be something that everybody is proud of,
Yeah.
and that reflects well on the community and serves our clients well.
And,
Well, you're doing
know,
a great job.
Thank you.
And I think what the concern is, we know that a lot of the homeless people have either substance abuse issues or mental health issues, and they need help. And you had said something to the effect that they don't have to leave anymore. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
So they're able to stay in the facility all day long?
Yes. The only thing that we do is we close the dorms between 10 and 12, but people are not required to leave the facility. We just want people out engaging in activities. And in terms of substance abuse and mental health issues, sure, there's people with those issues. I would say that the face of homelessness has changed so radically in the last 10, 20 years. I had in my head from years ago the picture of the person over the subway grate in New York City, very disheveled, and that's what I understood a homeless person to be, growing up and through a lot of my life. And there are so many people that are so close to the brink in our society. We have a lot of people in our shelter who work. They work at Home Depot, they work at CVS, they work at various jobs, and they can't afford to live in the community. And there are people that absolutely need services, and that's why we are there, so that, we want to help them get those services.
You had mentioned that you wanted to do training. What other kind of training facilities were you going to focus on other than the culinary?
I think the culinary arts will be the only, specific training program that we have, but we want to do educational programs like GED classes for people that don't have their GED. We want to bring in employment services so that they're on site. We do we started doing, we brought White Plains Linen to the food pantry last week to do a little job fair kind of thing there. If we had the space at the shelter, we could do things like that at the shelter. We don't have the space. We can't do that. So we want to do things like that. John, I don't know what's on your wish list?
We want to teach people how to use a checkbook. These people we're trying to push back out into society.
Life skills.
They can't
Yeah,
think
exactly.
that McDonald's is where they should be eating.
Mm-hmm.
They got to learn how to cook. So we got to teach them how to cook. Then we got to teach them how to balance a checkbook. We got to teach them how to fill out resumes, and a lot of things like that. We get help from a lot of people. The barber here in Buchanan told me anytime somebody's going for a job interview, if they need a haircut, send them down. I'll take care of them.
That's great.
I mean, there's a lot of community help. I think, from my point of view, what I think you guys need to do is anytime you're in a discussion, homeless shelters are not a cup of soup and a bowl and a cot. That's what it was 30 years ago. A warm place to lay down, a little something for your stomach. Today, it's transitioning people back into society. And that's what everybody has to understand. These are programs, very sincere, educational, dedicated programs that these people need. So that's my 2 cents.
Also, where are the majority of your clientele originally from? Are they from within a 5-mile radius, or do they come up from the bus from White Plains? Where are they originally from?
It's mostly northern Westchester area, because what will happen with somebody when they become homeless, they need to have their network around them, because if they need to borrow $5, they need to be in a place where they know people and can do that. So we don't have a lot of people from Yonkers, for example, who want to come and stay at Jam Peak House. It's mostly people in the area. That doesn't mean that there aren't people that were born in Yonkers or White Plains or whatever, but by and large, people in those communities are self-selecting because of the importance of social networks.
Makes sense.
And you're also mentioning a lot of the vets that you guys serve. There are a lot of programs out there for veterans. The Veterans Food Pantry is stocked, and it's very hard to get it out to people. And the VA has different housing vouchers, so I don't want to, it sounds like it might be a little, duplicate. My brother Vinny provides, my cousin Vinny actually, provides furniture for homeless vets who are transitioning. So, I'm just saying there are a lot of programs out there,
We are the only healthcare for homeless veterans program in Westchester County. So there isn't duplication. I mean, the vouchers that are available, the HUD-VASH vouchers that are available to veterans for housing come through the VA, and our case management staff work with the VA. That's how most veterans find housing, unless they're have a high income. They can't afford it without the HUD-VASH. So there is no duplication. This is a 90 to 180-day program. They're put on contract by the VA, and the VA will renew the contract as long as the veteran is doing what he or she needs to do in order to become independent. And we utilize, we love Paula, and there's a lot of great organizations out there, and we work with them.
So what would you think the root cause of homelessness is? I know you said there has been a paradigm shift when you're talking about more financial, but I know everybody has a vision of what homeless is. I know my brother-in-law was homeless because of drugs. So, what kind of programs would you have for something like that?
We work now with substance abuse providers. So if we have a client who is abusing substances, they can be mandated by DSS. They can already be mandated by the time they get to us, or once they come into us and substance abuse is identified, they can be mandated into a program. And it can be an outpatient program. The outpatient provider can then recommend that they be mandated for inpatient program if the person's not adhering to it. There's a lot of different tools that can be utilized. Doesn't mean that every single time it's going to work, but there are a lot of tools out there, and we use all those tools to try and make it a positive outcome.
So I know it kind of got off on a tangent there, but what do you feel is the root cause of the homelessness, and how would your programs be able to facilitate the correction of that type of issues?
I think that there's a lot of root causes, but if I had to really break it down, I would say that it's lack of education, which results in low employment skills, and financial instability. I would say that substance abuse or mental health that can sometimes be associated with homelessness, I would say that that's not a root cause of homelessness oftentimes, but you're seeing a sign of the impact of the precariousness with which many people in this society live. There are people that are living in unstable housing situations for years. So they may be cyclically homeless. We have this one guy who he's now in his own apartment because he's getting a subsidy. Really great guy. I'm going to say he's in his mid-60s, and he was with us for a long time because he couldn't find housing. He worked low-wage jobs his entire life, and his Social Security was like hardly anything. He could not find housing. He has no mental health issues. He has no substance abuse issues, and he volunteers. He volunteered at the pantry when he was with us, and he still volunteers. And I would say, that's not unusual. It is so hard out there. I mean, I was talking with somebody earlier today, and we were both saying, yes, we worked hard, to get where we are in life, but there's also a certain amount of luck and, perseverance, and there's a lot of people that have a really hard road, and maybe they had some trauma when they were young that they were never able to get through that because it was never dealt with, and they carried that with them.
Thanks.
And I think what's the saying, one paycheck away?
Exactly.
So, especially now with the inflation and everything going on, it's a lot of people struggling. My only other comment would be, I know where the proposal is, it's very close to the train tracks. And I know you've been looking around for different places to put this for a long time. I just, wish there was a better place instead of on top of a train track.
Well, we're used to it.
Oh, you're on South Water Street, but you
Chance
know,
Creek is right
yeah.
next to the track, too.
But you know what I mean? You know the trains rolling through and everything.
It's-
Just too bad you couldn't get away from
I
that.
know, it's funny because somebody was visiting the shelter earlier, which I invite everybody to do. I have some business cards, and I'm happy to take people on tours and also down to the site, you know. But we were laughing because, you know, I don't hear it anymore unless I'm on the phone. And then I have to say, okay, hold on for a minute. You get used to it. But yeah, I mean, I would prefer not to be there.
Peace
but-
and quiet, yeah. So is this definitely a done deal that this is going to be built there?
I don't think anything is a done deal
Okay.
until it's, you know.
The building
standing
starts.
It's going for a zoning amendment now.
Okay. All right.
Common Council said that they're gonna send it off for that, so we don't see that to be an issue.
Okay.
Long time between now and cutting the ribbon.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Are there any other board members that have any questions or comments? We have a few audience members. Yes. You have to come up to speak. Okay, sure. And then Marcus also has a question. Sorry, Marcus.
Yes. Sharon Murphy. I was curious, how many people on the average stay in the homeless shelter overnight?
Yeah.
Wasn't I close enough?
No, I have to go. It varies on a particular night because it depends on if we're full up with emergency service clients. We have a limit of 10 emergency service clients and 18 DSS clients. Our average daily occupancy is somewhere around 24, 25.
Okay. And then that's mixed, male and female?
Yes.
Okay. And then my other question, was you said that if people break the rules in the homeless shelter, they can leave or get a warning. What if they break the rules outside the homeless shelter?
That's a great question, and we have a good neighbor policy. Right now, where we're located, we're very strict about where clients are allowed to be when they're on site, and what they can do. And if they break those rules, they're out. We can't control, as you know, with anybody else, if somebody is in downtown Peekskill. But in terms of Buchanan, there isn't going to be the interest for clients to walk into Buchanan because everything that they're going to need is in
Kind
the
of across the
opposite
street.
direction.
Yeah.
Transportation, shopping, the Department of Social Services, it's all the other way.
I don't really agree with that because they have the Apple Farm, they have McDonald's, they have CVS, they have Chinese, they have a bank, and also day laborers hang out there every morning. So just as a mom of a young girl, I feel a little worried. We already have day laborers who congregate, and now you're going to have these other people who are in unfortunate circumstances. We're all one paycheck away. So that really concerns me. And I would like to know why you were moving outside Peekskill. Was this something Peekskill made you do? Or are you doing it on your own? Are you getting city funded or public funded, private funds? And that's all I'm wondering.
We are relocating within Peekskill.
It's right on the border.
That's within Peekskill. And the developer is building the shelter, and we will have, we're negotiating a lease with the developer. And
Being forced.
the property that we're in now, first of all, was sold, and it's waterfront property, so yeah, they want to do something with it other than a homeless shelter, and it's completely inadequate. We have no stove in the kitchen. I'd be happy to bring you on a tour of the facility, because when you actually see it, it's pretty clear why we can't stay there. And it also provides an opportunity, if you want to meet some of the clients.
Okay. All right. Marcus has a,
Just a quick question. Dave Smith, who's our planner, is in the audience also. Going back to the border with Peekskill, the idea, since it's right on our border, what are you planning to build there? What's the process of notifying us of what's going on? You're going to be right on our border, so we want to find out what kind of notification. I know you're going to a zoning text amendment on the building for the homeless shelter. Is that also including what you're planning to do closer to the village border? And want to make sure that I know what's going on, concerned about traffic or whatever's going to go on in that property as well.
The developer is responsible for that process and all the notifications, but I'm perfectly happy to keep in touch with you and tell you, as the process goes along. We're not driving the development process, which is really great because I'm not a developer. I don't know that stuff, but I will, be kept informed, and I'm happy to keep you informed. And my guess is that, well, not my guess, I know there's legal requirements for notification. I don't know if the village of Buchanan if there's a legal requirement, because I just don't know what the law is on that, but happy to keep in touch with you.
Dave, would you be able to maybe mention a little bit about that as well? That's our village planner behind you. It's coming out behind you right now.
Good evening. Dave Smith, no relation to the other Mr. Smith, Principal of Planning and Development Advisor. So I think, Marcus, you raised a good question, very informative presentation, very thorough, very comprehensive. And I would think that while you're not coordinating the circulation or the noticing, the developer is. My suggestion would be to have formal correspondence from the village to the city of Peekskill, either the mayor or Gene Friedman, who's the planning director, and indicate that you've had this type of forum. You want to remain active in the process. You want to be notified when there are public hearings, whether it's before the zoning board or before the planning commission for site plan approval, so that you're completely informed of what the application is, the extent of the application. There's still an environmental review process that the city needs to go through. So if there are issues with the environment, and the environment is defined broadly, it may include things like impacts to mutual aid or other concerns to the village, so that you are properly informed, you have an opportunity to participate in the process. Technically, and I did some review, I don't know if there's anything in New York State municipal law that there's any kind of distance requirement. I know that Westchester County has certain referral requirements if you are within 500 feet of a municipal boundary or of a state road or a county park, where there's a mandatory referral. And so I think it's just as a courtesy, you're asking to be kept in the loop as part of this process.
Okay, great. Thank you, Dave.
And one more last question. The developer will be building the building on your behalf, and will you own the building at the end of the land, or the developer owns it, you'll be renting?
The developer owns it and we'll be renting. We'll have a long-term lease.
Cynthia, another quick question, just to shed light on some of the concerns that came up. You said there's a lot of protocols and, rules that have to be followed. Is there a curfew? Can you just shed some light on some of that so people have a little more comfort level with,
Sure. The curfew is 12 a.m. It's not 12:01 a.m. It's not 12:02. It's not 12:10. If you are not in the facility at the stroke of midnight, like Cinderella, you turn into a pumpkin and you get Ubered to a shelter down county.
Okay.
What time do you open up to allow people back in? The curfew, so it starts
Right.
at 12, so it has to end at
people
some
can
time.
come in anytime. So somebody could come in off the street at 3 a.m. and if we had availability, they could stay there. But people are not allowed out. I think it's until 6 o'clock the following morning.
Okay, so it's 12 to
5
6 unless there's an emergency.
Right, exactly.
I'm piggybacking on that question. When they leave, are they going to certain locations, or they just walk around the neighborhood? That's what I understand.
You mean when somebody's transitioned out of the shelter?
On a day-to-day basis? If they
On a
just leave-
day-to-day
On a
basis.
day-to-day.
They go to employment and they go to programs.
Okay.
Is there anyone else? Do you have a question, or? Yeah, come up.
Chairman Bacher, just real quick to piggyback with it, you say, I show up at 3 a.m., there's no spot for me. Do I walk around town? I guess I have one question.
You get Ubered. Our client care workers call a shelter down county, find out where there's room, and you get Ubered down there.
And how often do people come at 3 a.m., 4 a.m.?
Not very often.
Another question to the public. You say your curfew was 12 o'clock. If they show up 12:05, what happens?
They get Ubered down county
Yeah,
to
she
the
elaborated.
shelter
Yep.
with
Okay.
availability.
I was just wondering, if somebody just showed up too late, there's no bed, they'll be Ubered. But if somebody's late to curfew, they get Ubered as well. Okay.
All right, if there's no other questions, thank you so much, Cynthia and
Thank you
John.
for your time.
Thank
Very
you very much for the
informative. Thank you
invitation.
for
I
coming.
appreciate it. Have a good
Okay,
evening.
great. Thank you.
Thank you for all you do.
Okay, I know AMS will be here at 8 o'clock. Is George Palmer on?
Yep, he's on.
Okay, let's move on to the kayak launch and boat ramp.
George, if you can hear me, you're on, George. Unmute yourself. And you want to turn on your video if you like.
That's okay.
Uh-oh.
I'm not in a good location.
We can hear you.
Okay. So we got some notices from the agencies that we submitted permits and applications to, and their inquiry was, is the village still interested in the kayak boat launch, and are they moving forward? So that's why Marcus put this on the agenda tonight, so that we can respond back to the agencies we submitted to. And in our last meeting, we were talking about the condition of the boat ramp and how it's in disrepair and costs and whatnot, and that if we don't move forward with the kayak portion of it, do we want to move forward with the repair of the boat launch and work on estimates and that kind of thing?
George, I think we have to. The boat ramp, I don't know the last time you saw that. The rebar is showing it's in really bad shape, and it's a liability for the village.
But I think in terms of the kayak launch, I think we were very clear we're not going ahead with that.
That's on hold, yeah, for now.
It's hold or dead, we got to tell the EC.
Okay.
It's
But we
dead.
can't move forward right now with it, so it's dead. If we want to revisit that, we have to open that up again.
Okay.
So, but the repair of the boat ramp is an important issue for us. What are your suggestions?
We can work on an estimate to repair it and submit that to the village. That's easy enough.
You think it could be repaired?
Yes. There's some of it that can be salvaged, and there's panels that need to be ripped out and redone. So, yes. So that also changes our permit too. So from what we're going to tell the DEC, we're going to tell them we're going to stop with the boat launch. With the kayak, and we're going to do a repair, and then they're going to want to know what that is all about. So we can do that.
George, with the repair requires dredging, no?
The repair, we have to look at where we're at with the tide line. So if we're below the tide, it's one kind of permit. If it's above the tide line, it's another kind of permit. So hopefully we won't have to do dredging. And we've really never looked closely at those panels. So when I say panels, there's like 5 or 6 panels that make up the boat launch. The ones that are deep into the water, we never looked at them very closely. I mean, the ones closer to the shore are in disrepair, but we should probably take a closer look at the ones that are further into the water.
Thank you.
I believe those are buried in mud. So that's what I mean about dredging. I mean, to utilize the boat ramp the proper way would require dredging at all, like at any tide level.
So, I'm not sure if the DEC would consider that dredging, or if they consider that maintenance of the ramp, or both. We'd have to talk to them about that. So.
George, it's Dan Stewart.
Yep.
My concern is, are we throwing money out the window here on a project that really, at the end of the day, there's bigger issues over there, okay? We've got a parking lot that I mean, on a good day, I mean, you know, it's more than just a boat ramp. I don't want to be throwing good money at something bad. So what are we looking here in a scope of costs?
So we'll put together an estimate before we move forward with that for your next meeting, and we'll let you know the cost.
Yeah, we have to do something because it's a liability. It's just such a big gap there with the rebar showing, and hopefully no one gets hurt. I don't know. It's like half in the water sometimes. You know, is there some way we can tape that area? There's got to be something because it's...
Just block it off?
Yeah, it's not a good situation.
Or remove it.
Yeah. So yeah, find out which is the most cost
The bigger issue is
effective.
the parking lot.
Yeah.
The bigger issue is the parking lot.
And George, when we had the opportunity to look for the money for the Entergy grant, the 15 million, we threw everything in the kitchen sink, and one of them was the parking lot there. And George, we put that in, and that didn't get approved, but I believe that was $900,000 for that to get repaired, because it had to be capped and then resurfaced again.
Right. Something in that amount, yes.
Yeah, because I'd love to
Yeah,
see that get done.
Would you say 900?
It's a
900.
large area.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big area.
And it was the dump, so it's still settling after all these years and settling, and so it's got to be capped properly.
Correct. Yeah, it's not just taking off 2 inches and putting back 2 inches. There's a lot of undulations and a lot of potholes and a lot of sinkholes. It's moving.
It's still moving, yeah. George, do you think, I'm just out of curiosity, just to help with those potholes, I don't know, I'm not an engineer or construction person, but what if we put like a layer of gravel? Would that wash into the river?
I think that would wash into the water, but we can try to put millings or something like that in there, which is a little bit more stable.
Just a temporary?
Yeah, just in the low spots, but we can look at that too.
It's got to be hot mix.
All right, any other questions with that for now?
No, I went and took a look at it, and I agree with everybody here. It's not, it's a liability at this point, and to repair it, I think the estimate that you're going to give us is way out of our ballpark. I mean, to remove them slabs, the demolition alone is going to be through the roof. And I don't know if we're interested in taking on that, plus the parking lot. I mean, you're talking about a lot of money. So, I mean, dare I say mafia block, but maybe this is where we put the mafia block.
Been there, done that.
Give me a flashback.
You know, we've had so many talks about mafia block in this building, so maybe we just put some mafia block across the boat ramp to secure it.
Maybe. That's one option for sure. Just to cordon it off from the public from use.
Yeah, correct.
That's a good option.
That's an option.
Yeah, there's plenty of...
As an
places to
Italian, I
watch
feel I
boat.
can say mafia block too,
Yeah,
by the
he
way.
can get away with it.
Hopefully the EOC will agree with you.
Ooh. It's a dangerous crew here. All
And
right.
between Peekskill, the town of Cortland, and Montrose, there's plenty of places to launch a boat too, so, you know.
Okay. Let's move on to the boiler recommendation. It's been time for a new boiler here in the building. George, what do you have for us?
We received 3 bids from 3 mechanical engineers, and we provided a recommendation. Hopefully you received it. The low bidder, Marcus, maybe you have it in front of you on the disadvantage there, but we did recommend the lowest bidder. I think it was at 12,000, Marcus?
I don't have it in front of me.
It's
but,
12,000.
Yeah, 12,000.
Yep.
I reached out to 3 different engineers, candidates, and as anybody knows, in order to switch, you need an engineer to provide the information to Con Edison.
Right.
So I think we found one that actually will work out. He's worked with Con Edison a lot.
That's important.
So I think we can move forward. hire him at the next meeting, and we can start doing the process. As anybody works, knows the county, it's going to take a while to do that. So at least we can start the ball rolling.
And that's
Marcus-
switched over to gas, right?
Just taking a quick look, maybe George, you can help too. I took a look at these proposals just quickly. I see like OLA included the removal of the underground tanks. The lowest bidder didn't include that. The second bidder had, the chimney needed to be replaced. The lowest bidder didn't have that. So is it really apples to apples that we're comparing? Because it doesn't seem that way to me. It seems like we have 3 bids all over the map.
George,
So that's
George,
difference
can
in
you address
price.
those questions?
The chimney lining
Has to happen.
is going to be included with the low bidder. He didn't mention it, but we called him up and we actually put that in our reference letter that he did include it because we picked up on that as well. With the tank, he's saying he's not going to include anything with the tank. That'd be separate. From his perspective, that's kind of a different issue because no one knows what you're going to be involved with the tank, whether it's leaking, something's going on. So I think that should be handled separately since you're going with a gas line. So, and we can ask him for a price for that as well, but.
Well, I think it would be wise to get a price on it, George. I mean, there's a glaring difference.
We have 2 prices that are in the same ballpark and one,
Completely
much
lower than the other 2.
There's usually a reason.
A remediation of a fuel tank, though, could be devastating.
Yeah, it could be $20,000.
Or
Oh,
more.
more than that.
Easy.
I guess that's his point. That's a whole different, anybody
You
who
can't
gets
put a number
involved,
on it.
even the other
All right, so
engineers-
can the other 2 remove that from their proposal and give us a number that matches what these guys from Rye?
We can do that.
The same scope?
We can do that.
I guess what Steve's saying is we're comparing apples to oranges.
With the tank.
Yeah, with the tank, it's a real wild card, and nobody knows. The other 2 are just throwing a number at it, and they could, like you said, it could go off into the stratosphere. So we can do that.
How old is that? George, do you have any concept of how old that tank is?
No idea.
Has it ever been tested?
No idea.
Well, maybe we should test it before we move forward. So it has been tested and it's not leaking? Okay.
Every year it gets tested, September.
Okay.
Good, thank you, Cindy. All right, yeah, and the lining has to happen because we're switching from oil to gas, so the lining of the chimney has to happen with that because the gas
Yep.
burns drier. Okay. then it
One
doesn't
question I
hurt to
have for
line.
you, George. If I'm not mistaken, a few years back, we had some engineering done on that. We also had a cost estimate for the removal and replacement of the boiler, didn't we? Didn't we already do some of this already?
I don't know. This is the first time I've been involved with it.
I thought it came in at like $85,000, and didn't we one time put a budget
I don't
together for that?
remember.
No, Siemens did an analysis, and their price was $150,000.
Yeah, well, we've already paid for that. We paid $65,000 or $59,000 for this already.
They didn't do any kind of analysis, all they said, this is the estimated cost to replace it. I can get you the Siemens.
They gave us the
report.
specs.
George, I don't remember seeing, George, do you remember seeing
I
specs?
don't remember them coming back with a spec, but we can look into that.
Yeah.
Okay, please.
Who was it? It's Siemens.
Siemens, yeah.
Because they did
Yep.
give us a product for the work that they said they did, and they told us how much what it was gonna cost, and they told us what the products we were gonna have to buy, and that's what their cost estimate was based on. So if we already paid over $60-some thousand for that estimate 2 years ago, we shouldn't be paying for it again.
Well, I don't think, you wouldn't be paying for the estimate, you'd be paying for an engineer to go through the whole process with Con Ed and go through all the numbers and make an application and all that, and confirm. So we did get a proposal from one of the mechanical contractors for a boiler that was 98, like a 98 or 95% efficiency. When you're burning gas, it's really efficient. So and then it boils down to the quality of the boiler. You know, is it a well-represented boiler? Is there parts nearby and all that? So that's what needs to be looked at.
Well, I understand that, George, but what I'm saying is, they gave us a cost estimate, they told us what we had to do, they had to base that cost estimate on a product and an analysis. If we've already paid for it, we shouldn't be paying for it again. That's all I'm saying. They wouldn't just pull a number out of the air. They had to do some engineering, and if we paid for it, they should give us that engineering documentation, and we shouldn't have just paid for a number of what it'll cost. We should get all the supporting data that came from that cost estimate. That's our product.
Yeah, so we should actually, now that you mentioned that, take that, give that to the 3 engineers. 'Cause if they didn't have it, that would help them to confirm, oh, okay, this is now, you've given me all this data, my price is maybe X lower. So that's another thing to give to this 3 engineers.
That's a good point.
So,
Okay.
Well, why wouldn't we get it? We paid for it.
Yep.
We didn't pay $60,000 for a number of how much we have to pay them again. We gave them $60,000 to tell them we needed $500,000. You know, that's not right. There's an analysis that came with it. There was a thick packet with that. We should have that information. And if not, they should give us our money back because they didn't supply us a product.
All right, George, if you could look into that too for us, that would be great. Good point.
we can do that.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, George.
Thanks, George.
Okay, we're done with George. So, if we could,
I think we got some people.
yes, we do. That's, yep.
We're done with George. Thank you again.
Thanks,
Go-
George.
Go back on vacation. Thank you, George.
Oh, you're on vacation. Okay, enjoy. Thanks for coming.
Good night.
Okay, AMS, development. Are we in the house? Okay. Hi. Thank you for coming back. I know I had asked you to get some information, to come back, to present, and appreciate that.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, members of the board, my name is Mark Weingarten. I'm a partner in the law firm of Del Bello, Dinellen, Weingarten, Wise, and Wiedeker, and it's my pleasure to be here once again representing AMS Acquisitions LLC in connection with its proposal to redevelop the approximately 6-acre site located at the intersection of Albany Post Road and Craft Lane in Buchanan, New York. I'm joined tonight from AMS by Ryan Sutherland, as well as our architect, Mark Creedon, the co-managing principal of Perkins Eastman, who was with us last time. The last time we were here, we shared our vision for the long vacant site. We responded, I would characterize your response as optimistic, but you certainly raised some concerns.
Cautiously optimistic.
Okay, fair enough. But you certainly raised some concerns. So we went about and revised our proposal to try to respond to those concerns which were raised the last time we were here. The proposal still, and we will be showing it to you in a moment, it consists of 148 luxury housing apartments, 1 and 2 bedrooms, with upscale amenities. However, we've also made some significant changes to the design in response to your concerns, which our architect will show you. In summary, the redesign, which now contemplates locating everything within 1 building rather than 2 buildings plus an amenities building, has allowed us to significantly decrease the impacts of the project on steep slopes and wetlands, as we discussed last time, as well as increasing our parking count from 175 to 202, slightly under the required zoning, but very close. And the bulk of the parking is now underneath the building rather than on the surface, which again is part of the reason we're able to come off the steep slopes and the wetlands, and we'll show you that pictorially in a moment. We told you last time that we recognize our proposal does not meet with the current zoning, so we were asked to come back tonight and dig in specifically to those nonconformities. Let me start out by saying the proposed use of multifamily housing is permitted in the district. We do know there is also a requirement of a mixed use, which we'll talk about at the end. Our proposal will develop the long vacant site and beautify the neighborhood, in our opinion, and we will also be building sidewalks as a pioneer for your plan for creating the new village-like community. We believe that our proposal is the highest and best use for the land and makes the project financially feasible. In order to reach that conclusion, we have requested a project which will require the rezoning I just mentioned. The current zoning, as you know, is C1 and M1. It runs through a portion of the property. We need to rezone the M1 portion to C1 and map the revised overlay district. Once that would be done, the density is still higher than would be permitted by the overlay district. The height of 5 stories and 65 feet is still higher than required, permitted rather. The parking spaces of 202, as I mentioned, and we'll give you the ratio, is slightly under the required number. But the wetlands are no longer impacted. The buffer, specifically the last time, is no longer impacted, and the steep slopes, what we will show you, are significantly changed. Although because they are throughout the site, it would be impossible to be off them completely. Having heard the nonconformities, I will remind you of what we believe are a couple of the benefits and why we believe this is a good idea, not just for us, but for you. We believe there will be a significant generation of net property tax benefits from this project for both the village and the school district, which we will have to prove through a socioeconomic study during the seeker process. We will create construction jobs and activities, which again will be more specific during seeker, but the local businesses will love the construction project, the restaurants, the delis, and we will also, at this village, you will benefit from the long-term customers that will be created by the people who will be living in this beautiful new neighborhood. We will create a more diverse housing stock, a place for empty nesters in your village to relocate from their single-family homes. The foresight is to stay nearby the family home, and even more importantly, bringing people with income to live within your village, ready to start a family, who will then eventually be looking to buy a single-family home, and we would hope they would want to stay in their hometown and their neighborhood, which they had then adopted. This leads to something that strengthens your single-family home market. It's been happening throughout Westchester. Finally, as I mentioned, and after we go through this, Mark will go through this with you in a moment, there are 2 other things that we will discuss with you. The issue of the commercial use and whether or not the site can do that. We have our proposal right now does not include it, but we could discuss with you how we could do it and what limitations that would potentially create. And also the issue of a secondary access on Albany Post Road, which was discussed the last time. Of course, that will include a requirement and a discussion with New York State, as it's a state road. As far as curb cuts concerned, there are also some other limitations that we'll go through with you. But again, once we go through it pictorially, we'll come up and we'll have that discussion and answer any questions. So I'm going to ask Mark now to come up, show you the presentation, which includes both the former presentation we gave you the last time, so you'll have something to be able to compare it to the new one. Mark?
Madam Mayor, Deputy Mayor, trustees, staff, thank you for having us back. Appreciate your time. I'm Mark Creedon. As Mark mentioned, I'm a co-managing principal of Perkins Eastman Stanford office. So we're going to take you through, next slide please. I'm going to take you a brief overview of what we shared with you last time we were here, just to kind of brief everyone's memory. This is the site that we have between Craft Lane and Albany Post Road. It's about 6 acres, about 260,000 square feet. Next slide. We know the site. We've got adjacent properties. There's the hardware store and other businesses nearby. We've got the 100-foot wetland setback, which is the blue line to the right next to the lake. The lake is obviously a feature of the site, as are the woods and the property. To the left with the green dashed line and the arrows are the steep slopes that we have. We know we have this topography on the site to deal with, and it certainly is a challenge for us. And then there's 2 potential access points. One's the access point that's just kind of aggregated over time off Craft Lane, and then there's the potential, which is that Mark mentioned, which has DOT implications off 9A, right? Next slide, please.
Could you just go back to that potential strip there? Is that between the hardware store and the other building?
That's correct.
Yeah, I had heard that there was just this little strip of property that goes between the hardware and the other commercial.
Correct. It's not really usable. We expect, and the civil engineer will back us up, I believe, that it will even meet DOT standards to get that as an entrance or an exit. It's just it's too narrow.
Okay.
You don't have the visibility, so there's challenges there. But we illustrate it as a potential because it exists. Thank you. So JMC did a great job. We went back and they did their steep slopes analysis for us, right? So this is sort of just catching up a little bit with the concept we shared with you earlier. The steepest slopes are the orange slopes. That's greater than 30%. Those are the slopes that are of most concern for everyone, I believe. And then the other slopes, 15 to 30, there's a little bit more movement there. They're not as steep, so we do get into those a little bit. So then we overlaid, next slide please, and there's the wetland setback that we identified. The last project that we shared with you last time we were here is 3 buildings. We have 2 residential buildings and an amenity building kind of down near the water feature. And then surface parking around. Next slide. This is the view of the amenities building on the left and the 2 buildings as they kind of, zigzag through the site and sort of embrace the topography on the other side. So that mentioned building A and B, the residential buildings, with some parking below them. And building C was the amenities building where you would expect it to be near the water feature, and the rest is parking. Square footage wise, I think we touched base on that. We don't need to go into that. The new proposal, which we'll share with you in a moment, is essentially the same number of units, the same number of residential area. It gets a little bit larger because we pull the parking underneath the building, right, in terms of footprint. So here's the overlay of the original scheme. We want to focus on building A on the left, which was the one of most concern. I think one of the trustees brought that point to bear, as well as others. We had hoped it was actually, due to the parking requirement, we could pull it farther down, but the parking requirements forced us to kind of push it in there. So we did the analysis, and obviously there's a significant impact with this scheme on slopes. 8.7% of the site area, and slopes greater than 30 was 7.8%. Total impacted slopes was 16%. And the impacted buffer was 43% because we had that amenities building, kind of encroaching on the wetlands, which of course everyone would like it to be there, but it really encroached a little bit too far into the wetlands buffer once we had that surveyed properly. This brings us to the new scheme. As Mark mentioned, what we've done is essentially combine the two buildings into one, and we pulled as much parking as possible underneath that footprint, which allowed us then to go to the next slide, to basically pull away from the steep slopes, which is roughly approximated by the yellow arrows and the yellow dashed line, and then the yellow line to the right of the drawing illustrates the 100-foot wetland setback. So we're completely within that. That's not to say we don't impact the slopes a little bit, but we pulled the building as tight as we could in the flattest areas we could within the serious part of the setbacks and the other criteria on the site. So there's no impact to the wetlands, reduced impact on the steep slopes. We have a little bit more flexibility for planning site access. I mean, it would give us more flexibility along Craft Road, where that entrance occurs. So we've actually pushed that as far to the north, plan north, if you will, as far to the east up Craft Lane, which gives us kind of more queuing and more space before the intersection at 9A and Craft, which is always a good thing, right? And then the additional covered parking. So it's almost flipped. It's interesting. So the number of parking spaces that we had surface parking are now pulled underneath the building. It's almost reversed. So the number of surface parking that we had, the amount of parking we had beneath the two residential buildings is now surface parking. So that's reversed. Next slide, please. So the new building is 156,000 square foot of residential with 5,000 square foot amenities, also contained within that. So the size is the same. The footprint is 63,000 square feet, which is parking in common areas. So that's that footprint where it hits the ground. So that's a little bit larger than the other two buildings because we pull the parking underneath that.
Right.
Same number of units. The split, is roughly that split. That will change as we go through the evolution of design, but that's the approximate split of the unit types. Total gross floor area, including parking, that's underneath the building is 224,000 gross square feet. A little bit bigger than the other ones combined. Next slide, please. So I'm sorry, go back. Thank you. So just to call the attention, the entrance to the site now, as we've got it diagrammed, is up Craft Lane by that yellow asterisk. That's the main entry to the site. Thank you. Next slide. Main entry to the parking is where you see the other yellow asterisk. So you come in the main entry road, there's some parking to the right as you come across that road. There's a drop off in front of the building where the main entrance would be. And then just around the corner off of that is access to the parking that's covered. In that little roundabout drop off area, there's also a road that brings you to the 54 surface parking area down below, right towards Route 9A. That brings us to 202 spaces. We have 2 short-term spaces for a drop off or deliveries in front of the building. And it brings us to a ratio, as Mark mentioned, 1.35 per unit. 200 parking spaces for the residents, effectively. Next slide. So to summarize the impact on the steep slopes, we've overlaid this on the steep slope analysis that was done by JMC. Significantly reduced, as Mark mentioned, so now we're impacting 4.8% of the site area, significantly less. I won't do the math, but it's approximately half, maybe more than half. The slopes greater than 30% is 2.3% of the site area. That's significantly reduced. I think it's like a third of what we had before. And then total impacted slopes is 7%, again about half. And we're not impacting the wetlands buffer at all. We completely stepped back from that. And we have a comparison both side by side later on, so it'll be easy to go back and forth for you all. Next slide. And so this is what the other view looks like. If we were in a drone across from the lake looking back, what you see is that elevated courtyard over the parking. So parking is below the building. You see the two wings of the building making that courtyard. Very similar look and feel as the other buildings we shared with you last time as well. Quality materials, not monolithic, breaking the scale down balconies and other materials. Next slide. This is a view. There's a little diagram in the view in the lower left-hand corner of the image. So it's kind of as though we're slightly in a drone, just up Craft Lane a little bit, kind of looking back at the building. So you see the entry road and parking to your left up the slope. That's actually on the flattest part of that sloped area of the site. And then to the right is that additional surface parking that you get to after the drop-off at the entrance. Next slide. So this is a view between Catherine, I think it's Gallagher, lanes or streets on 9A, kind of looking back across the hardware store, what the building might look like. We've got a 30-foot buffer, so it can be partially screened, but that gives you an approximate height relative to the scale of the building front and what you would see from 9A. So we've really taken the building and shoved it as far back into the site as we could on the flattest part of the site that was available to us. Next slide. So here's the side-by-side summary, kind of back and forth. So existing slopes obviously don't change. Impacted slopes were 8.7% previously to 4.8 now. In greater than 30, we were 7.8, and now we're at 2.3, which is a significant drop. And then totally, 16% in the previous scheme, we're down to 7% in this scheme. So it's more than half of the drop of impacted slopes across the entire site. And the buffer, of course, is 0 compared to 43% prior. I'm going to pause for a second in case there's questions about this comparison. And then I believe the next slide is essentially the zoning table, which is essentially the same zoning table we shared previously. The difference being we have more parking, a higher parking ratio. Without pause for questions.
I know one of my concerns was the setback from the road, because I didn't want to see it right on the road. So the last picture that you had, I get a better concept of what you're doing.
Marcus, can you go back?
I know what it is with the cough.
Yeah. That's on Teresa?
Yeah, yep, that's it.
I just wanted to, as we discuss the issue of mixed use later, the irony is that you do have a commercial use right in front of the building. It's just not on our property, but that is one of the reasons, one of the issues that we have because of the way this site is located. And I do want to, if we can go back to that, with the side-by-side or just the slopes analysis to show. Yeah, there you go. I mean, if you take a look at the bottom left-hand corner there is a small portion there which we currently have for parking that's not a steep slopes area, so that's one of the things that we could be looking at and we could go through. The problem that we have is if we add commercial, we need to add more parking. The parking that we've now developed in context of the discussion that we had with you last time is we roughly have within the building now one parking space for every unit. I think it's 146 spaces for 148 units. That math will work itself out. The rest of this can be other parking for more unit holders or visitors parking and that kind of thing. If we put the commercial piece there, it's not a moneymaker for us, which we're willing to work with you on it. First, you'd have a setback issue. We would be in violations of your setback and need a variance for that. But assuming for the moment that was something that you would be okay with or your board would be okay with, the issue that we have is adding the more parking. Adding the more parking would force us back more up into the steep slopes, which is where we were the last time to add surface parking. And I just don't think that that's a trade-off that we're willing to do. But I want you to understand what it is we're working with, the site constraints as to why we're coming to these conclusions.
Well, I was the one who had asked a lot of those questions about the commercial because that's one of the reasons why I was against certain high-density population developments. You had stated that you were going to bring some cost-benefit analysis to us, but in your presentation, you said you were going to depend on the seeker analysis for the cost-benefit, and the seeker would be part of the planning process, so you would already have to have the zoning changes you're asking for when you would be supplying it.
Actually, unfortunately, that's not.
You don't think so?
Sir.
Okay,
No,
so
actually, under state law, the requirement is that you are required to have your environmental review before any action is taken, which includes the zoning, which is actually why most of the time when you go for a zone change in a municipality, it's not always the case. The The legislative body, your body, is typically the lead agency in the environmental review process because the threshold action is the zoning action before the site plan ever takes place. So that environmental review that we would be required to do, you wouldn't want us to do it willy-nilly. You'd want us to spend a lot of time, hire an expert, go through it, and give you a real study. Would be done, and if this body chose to be lead agency, you would be the lead agency reviewing that and making findings eventually. And if you determined that it didn't work, you wouldn't vote to change the zoning. The zoning is not in place first. You must do the review first.
So you would provide us the cost analysis?
Yes.
The impact?
We would do a socioeconomic benefit report, which would go through all of the economics that would go through this, and whatever questions you would ask that you would want in that report would be in there. So yeah, we would give you a cost-benefit analysis and whatever else you were seeking that you needed to be informed before you would make the decision on the rezoning.
And also, as you showed, you're still at 2.3% on a 30% grade. At what percent will we be able to consider it de minimis? How can we interpret the code? Because currently, we're not allowed to allow anything on a 30% grade. We can go from 15 to 30%, you can get variances for that, but I don't believe our code allows you to have it variance at over 30%.
Well, again, Westchester County is a place where steep slopes are virtually everywhere. I could tell you that there are very few new developments in Westchester County. I'm going to leave out the urban areas, but and even some of the urban areas like Yonkers and other places where there are these tremendous hills, we have steep slopes ordinances. If you have them as an absolute, where you can't do anything on them, it's going to be very difficult to ever develop a medium-sized, because I don't consider this large, medium-sized commercial type development. It just won't work. It's almost impossible. So what you wind up doing is it's a trade-off. You have a discussion as to, you as a board, you certainly have it within your purview to make those decisions, and if you have a code that prohibits it, you can either get a variance from it, or you can create a change to it that allows it to be within your discretion to permit us to do that. Now, of course, if you take a look at what we've done now on that, most of what we've done is that most of the above 30% slopes now are surface parking, and there's a difference between putting a building on that area as opposed to surface parking. There's much lesser impact, et cetera. So there's only a very small portion of the building on the new site. You'll see it's like a little corner of the building of a couple of them that it comes in. So I think it can probably be refined a bit. This is a concept plan. This is not at the site plan level yet, and it's something that we would eventually get to. But I think we've done a pretty good job. But if you're asking us to do completely miss the steep slopes, that's just not something that's possible.
I was just curious what our attorney's interpretation was, how we can get around it without changing the law. Because I haven't read the law in a while, just going off the top of my head, I believe it says you can disturb it if there's no other use for your land. So we couldn't create legislation that prohibited you from using your land, but your design is what's causing the prohibition.
Well, actually,
So I just wanted to get what her interpretation is. That's all. That's all.
Sean, we have in the past called 3%.
Okay.
Or 30% de minimis.
All right, that's all. That's the only question I was asking.
And as a lawyer, I would always show you and say that we could argue a lot about what's reasonable. It's just reasonable use of the site. So there you go.
And she helped develop the law when we did it 10, 15 years ago, so I just didn't remember what we considered de minimis at the time we discussed it, that's all.
Okay.
I think what you guys originally came up with and what you came back with, I mean, huge improvement. I mean, and we appreciate that.
Well, again, that's what this process is. You tell us what the concerns are, and we go back and we go to work. We try to make it work.
No, I thought it was important for you to come and answer these questions, because we had spent a lot of time doing an overlay district, going back and forth, back and forth. So it was appropriate to address those questions to the board, and this way we have a better idea. And like I said, the picture before, I think, really explains what it really, is going to look like. Like I said to you before, my concern, it was going to be built like right on the road, and it would be towering over 9A. But it seems to be, how many feet was that setback? Did you say 30?
So we're 30 back from the
30.
property line. So
Okay.
And that property depth, I want to say, is roughly 100-something feet.
Right, but the property line is the back of the hardware
the hardware store.
So 30 feet from the property line of the back of the hardware store.
Okay.
If you scale it out,
So
more than
from-
100 feet.
Yeah.
From 9A.
We'll get you a right number, but we're a lot farther from Albany Post Road than we are, than that. It's we're measuring from when he says 30 feet from the hardware property line, that dotted line right behind.
Okay. Pictures tell a story.
Yeah,
Yes,
And I
they
think it
do.
looks great.
looks great.
Thank you.
If you're done with your presentation, because
Yeah.
Dave Smith maybe wants to give an update to the board in regards to what the process would take.
Sure.
or-
I mean,
or-
and I'm happy to do that and work with Dave many times. I would just mention to you, at some point, we're hoping today, or at some point, what we're looking for is permission to submit, and it's general sense that there's an open mind to it, which is what our client is looking for. If that would happen, we would be then working with your professionals to seek a rezoning, which again would include this seeker as well. You could determine to be the lead agent on that. And that's the process that we would go through with you, and I'm sure that David's going to describe to you. So that is what we're hoping to take away from this evening, if we can. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right,
Thanks,
thank you
guys.
for coming in, and thank you for your presentation.
Thanks for choosing the Village of Buchanan, too.
Dave, why don't you come up and talk about a little bit of the process and that would the board and the public can understand that?
Good evening once again, Dave Smith, Principal of Planning and Development Advisors. So you've heard a presentation, a fairly comprehensive presentation on the redevelopment of the site, or the development of the site. And so as Mr. Weingarten has indicated, kind of the next step is if you are so inclined to consider the zoning text amendments, then they would prepare an application submitted to you. It would include an environmental assessment form. It may include some of the other reports, the socioeconomic, it may include traffic reports as part of that initial submission. There may be other reports that come out of kind of the review process. So under New York State law, you have the State Environmental Quality Review Act. So as the lead agency, because you are processing, or you would be considering processing the zoning text amendments, you're the only legislative body that could approve that action. So it makes sense, since you have the most governmental authority, that you would assume the lead agency role, and you would coordinate the environmental review process with the other interested and involved agencies, and that might include New York State DEC, New York State DOT, Westchester County may be involved as well. And so procedurally, the applicant comes in, they would submit the paperwork, the reports. You would send out a notice of intent to act as lead agency. That puts all the other agencies interested and involved on notice that there's this particular action. They would have the EAF form, and so that essentially starts the environmental review process. You would have the statutory and required zoning public hearings. You would wrap in, as Mr. Weingarten had indicated, it makes sense for them and for you to consider site plan issues at the same time that you're considering zoning, so that at the end of the process, everybody has a better understanding of what the potential impacts are, environmental impacts, and that may include visual, it may include traffic, it will include a whole series of environmental impacts that are identified as part of the environmental assessment form process. So it can be a very rigorous review. Certainly there are many opportunities for public input. I think that's part of what you need to have. There are certain concerns with respect to the overlay district and the inclusion of kind of a commercial piece. That's part of that thinking, part of the process that this village went through in detail, as you had described. And I think that's an important planning component. And I think, from a planner's perspective, it's important to understand how this type of development fits into the broader scheme, or the broader context or fabric of the Village of Buchanan, because you're going to have potentially 148 new households. They're going to want to get from point A to point B. Can they do that efficiently and safely? They're all going to have disposable income. Mr. Weingarten mentioned about the socioeconomic report, and that's one of the things that I consider when I'm working on projects like this is, what's the value added to the community with all these new residents, because they do provide an economic engine, if you will, for additional spending within the community, and that's each household brings with it some measure of disposable income, and they're going to spend their money some portion of that money within
Within
the
their
greater
community.
Buchanan community, whether that's on hairdresser or dry cleaners, barber, restaurants. So there's all these other kind of tertiary impacts that will be evaluated as part of the environmental review.
Sorry, if I may as well, as part of the process, we have to hire, besides Phil, the village have to entertain hiring a traffic engineer that will review their reports and any other consultants along the way. So I work with Phil to give you recommendations as we go through the process, so that when we get those people on board as well, so when we receive their reports, we'll have our own consultant reviewing their reports and providing their feedback back to the village board.
We have many traffic studies in that corridor over the last number of years because of the development that was to take place across the street from Buchanan Hardware. We had to have had 3 traffic studies during that entire development process. So that information is readily available. And also we have to remember that any legislation that we pass for this project also would apply to the other project that was put before us or postulated before us across the street from the church, another 6 acres. And the property across the street from Buchanan Hardware. So we can't change or just accept this development without taking into consideration the possibility of other development within that corridor. So unless you're going to make a different zone, a C3 zone, we can't really spot zone things like that. So it's not just this property that will be affected, it'll be other properties within that corridor, which would fall under the same socioeconomic analysis also. So
That's correct. If you have, the zoning would have to be evaluated comprehensively. So if it affects other properties, there needs to be some consideration for how that impact may occur as well.
And your socioeconomic analysis, you spoke about the ancillary effects of the higher population, increasing the business within the area. How do you break down that benefit to the village? Because if somebody goes into a store or into a restaurant and they spend extra money, we only get a portion of the taxes back from the county. So how do you evaluate the benefit to the village when it comes to, say, the benefit of having 10 extra people go to a restaurant every month or something?
Well, so part of that analysis is certainly there's understanding that there's a tax benefit, a sales tax benefit that accrues to the village. That's a small portion, but I think the bigger issue is that we understand, based on the types of rents that they'll be asking for, what the household income is going to be. And so we understand that based on that, a certain portion of that household income is spent on the rent. And then there's another portion that's spent on transportation, and then there's another portion that's spent on that has the disposable income portion. And that's all based on U.S. Census data. And so from that figure, we can calculate, or at least provide an estimation, or they'll provide the estimation, of kind of the total spending power for the 148 homes. And so there's some order of magnitude that the community will understand that there is this purchasing power, of X number of dollars. And typically for a project like this, it's probably to be, I'm going to say, over $1 million worth of purchasing power from this one particular project alone. Not all of it's going to be spent in Buchanan, but there will be some portion that's going to be spent. And so
that goes to my point. How do you analyze the amount of money that would be spent in the village? Because a project with $1 million purchasing power, we don't have many businesses. We're the smallest community in Westchester.
They'll come. When you bring people, they'll come.
Okay, but how does that benefit the taxpayer?
Because you're bringing business, which you're bringing tax money. You're bringing in revenue that way.
And I'm just asking him to give us the analysis on how he breaks that down.
And he
so
will
we can
give
do
us,
it.
and they're going to give us the analysis.
And what I've been talking about is just that's purchasing power. There's also with the redevelopment or the development of the property, there's going to be a real estate tax implication. So there's going to be an increase in real estate taxes.
Correct.
They'll have to provide that as well. And typically what they'll do is they'll find comparables, or they'll work with the assessor to come up with an assessed value at full occupancy. And so that will translate, and you'll have that figure as well, what the village could expect from an increase in real estate taxes.
And that requires people. That's the engine to bring that in. And the only way to do that is development.
Yes,
And-
yes.
and-
And I think there's a need certainly in Westchester County for housing of all types.
Correct.
I think, and, you know, that's part of the kind of the socioeconomic change within the county. The Village of Buchanan, you know, everybody understands you've had issues with the closing of Indian Point. So you're looking at other opportunities for economic development. And this is one that provides, I think, some benefits that the village should consider as part of this.
I'll go on record as saying that I think it's a great opportunity for the village. I really do.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
I guess I would only mention two things. One is those reports, when they come in, there are nationally and regionally accepted formulas that they have for the direct benefits are easy to calculate. What are the actual property taxes? You get an assessed value from your assessor. You're estimating out what the construction costs. You go through the whole, and you come up with what that number is going to be. Then you have to have formulas for how many school children are you going to generate off of an apartment like this, which, by the way, is not very much when you start looking at the comparables. But you do that,
Correct.
and you put a price tag on each one of those for your school district, and you make sure that the expenses are going to be outweighing the revenues are going to be outweighing the expenses. So there are formulas, and then there's a formula for what you were referring to, which is indirect benefit, which is that purchasing power that David was talking about. And you'll go through it. This is what the experts do. The last thing I'm going to mention is, and I was surprised at Marcus because he always does when we're at this thing. The best news for you is all those experts you're hiring, we have to pay for. Right. So the State Environmental Quality Review Act states that. So anybody who's watching on television understands that all that work you're going to be doing in context of this, we have to reimburse you for your costs within the seeker statute for those traffic consultants and David's work and all the rest of it. That's how it works. So I thought I'd add that.
And I think when we were talking about commercial or bringing in businesses or the people for the businesses, it's been difficult for us to bring in business, to have people support the business because we just don't have that amount of people. We're not on the main highway, so we're not getting that traffic. 9A is basically going from Peekskill, Buchanan, Montrose, so it's local traffic. And how that benefits the community, we wouldn't be able to, because when you get these large retailers, for example, Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts is an anomaly to have here, okay? But when you get the bigger Starbucks or whatever retail, they actually do studies. They do the socioeconomic studies, the traffic, they do income, they do all that, and we wouldn't be able to pull something in like that. And I know at one time, years ago, someone had mentioned about bringing a bank in here, but then once again, they would do a study on the population, and we don't have that.
Mayor, you're 100% right, and I can tell you as someone who represents and has represented Starbucks and banks and all of the, in various retail, and we've done millions of square feet of it, they do what they call their demographic studies.
Yep.
And depending on the size of it, at Costco, it can be a 5-mile circle, to a bank, which might be a 1-mile circle, concentric circle around the site, to something that's a little bit smaller, like a dry cleaner that does, a few blocks. But basically what they do is they look at the population and the income of the people within those circles, and when they hit a particular number, they say that's a site where we want to be. And that's just how it works. And you're right. Right now, you are lacking in that population and income that's going to be able to attract that kind of thing. So it may not be part of our site, but we would believe, because we've seen it happen in other places, where this may very well follow a development like this.
Okay. This could be a plus for the village as well as the school district. So, that's my feeling.
And for the surrounding communities.
And the surrounding community, correct.
And as we go through the secret process, of course, there's going to be concerns about the traffic. So
we cross that bridge when we get to it.
We get it.
And that's part of that process.
No bridges.
Nope, no bridges.
No bridges.
So
should we be drafting an application?
what's the board's pleasure?
Yes.
I
Go
would say
forward?
yes. Absolutely.
Sure, we need data, absolutely.
Terrific.
I say yes. We need more than data.
So thank you. We will
I think it's
work with
exciting, and I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely, thank you.
We'll work with your professionals, we'll put it together, and we'll start the formal process. So thank you again, we appreciate your
All
time.
right, and thank you for coming in and redoing.
And thank you for choosing our little village.
All right, thanks so much. Okay, we took care of that. Let's see. I'm just going to say about the logo contest, we are going to announce at our meeting on Tuesday, because I'd like to have the winner here. So we can take that off of the agenda. Just wanted to say that. The logo, the village logo.
Tuesday?
Well, yeah, hopefully they
Okay,
could
all
come
right.
in on Tuesday. This way we can present a certificate of appreciation and then
Great
whatever
idea.
their reward is.
Beautiful.
Okay, so that's off the list. I'm going to go next to, because we still have our planner here. We had a request from a resident, Carmen Bacher, a discussion on lot coverage. If you would like to come up to the podium to explain what you would like to do or what your thoughts are. Okay.
I didn't know this was a public speaking, so it's very clearly, I think, very simple. You know, the lot coverage was set in place probably in the 80s, 90s. I don't even know when it was set up, the bulk. It's set for the same zoning, so R20, R7.5, R10 all have the same 30%. I don't think the 30% envisioned people using their backyards as entertainment spaces, as a place to bring community members in, as places to gather. You know, pavers have become very popular, outdoor kitchens have become very popular, porches, decks, you know, you name it. You see the Architect video or commercial all the time. COVID, and not that I want to bring COVID into this, but has brought people outdoors and, you know, entertaining outside. So if you look at the 40% or 30% coverage, it's very restrictive, I believe. I believe a lot of people have gone over the 30% in the village, not even knowing there is a 30% village coverage. You know, pools have been placed in for the last 2 years because of COVID. I know on the zoning board, no one has come to us as far as variances except for one. I don't know about the planning board, but I don't know if anybody's gone to the planning board for site, you know, above ground, below ground. If you look at the surrounding communities, I think 40% Cortland, I think I sent you guys information on other communities. 40% is kind of a number out there. I think actually Scarsdale has a great
Yeah, I think you had
tiered
Scarsdale and
structure
Mamaroneck in there.
where someone who has a R7, where their lot size is 4,000 square feet, their home is, their coverage, they can't put a shed, they can't put anything in their backyard, according to our code currently, as I read it. You can't put a driveway in, you know, because even stone, it says pervious and impervious in our code currently, which doesn't make any sense, but so I'm just would like the board to consider increasing or reviewing, I guess, the coverage. You know, the AMS guys here have come here to talk about development and bringing development in the community. I think there's been a lot of turnover in the community. And there's people coming in saying, hey, I got this brand new house, let me do something with it, let me, you know, work with it. And I would hate to see them handcuffed because of a lot coverage when they're not changing their backyard to be a parking lot or parking a trailer back there or dumping waste or whatever. They're doing it to entertain and make an entertaining space. So I don't know if you have any questions or...
Well, what brings you here? What?
Well, I have an issue of my own.
Okay.
But, and again, I'm willing to remedy it, but I don't think what I did to my backyard, talking to my neighbors, talking to the community members around it, actually talking to people who come here and say, wow, this looks awesome, this is terrific. You know, no one's here has seen it, but I know family members have seen it and have come in, they've complimented me on it. So, and actually, if you look at the 7 criteria of a variance, which I thought I would be able to get the variance based on, there's no as I see it, there's no restriction on how high the variance could go, unless, it's a concern. But if you look at the 7 criteria, I did work to my backyard to increase the value of it, to improve the value. So the 30% coverage, I think, stops me from allowing me to improve value. Backyard kitchens, backyard pools, backyard sheds, people want that in their yards now, the storage and stuff. So I think that improves value. By not allowing that, I would see that as a hardship to the homeowner, as long as you're not affecting the neighborhood. If you look at the lot coverage itself, I don't see anywhere in the code saying why there is a lot coverage, except for maybe flooding, which is in a different part. It's not in the zoning. And even there, I think it's very unclear of, like, you have to be in a flood district to really talk about getting a variance for the flooding, building your structure. So besides water table or water diversion, which I don't have any issues, no one's ever complained. I've lived here for, since 2010. I don't see any reason why people shouldn't be allowed to, beautify their backyard. And I'm willing to show anybody. I showed the zoning board. I know they like the layout and the look. I just think they were concerned with putting the variance in and setting a precedence to everyone out, and basically spot zoning.
So I'm speaking for myself. I just have a few concerns. We've had the 30% lot coverage for quite a while. And one thing I don't want to see, because I'm a lifer here, whether I'm on the board or not, I'm here. I don't want us to start turning into lower Westchester County, where the lot coverage is horrendous, or the Bronx, where just about every parcel is something on it. There's no grass, whatever. You are one of the newer properties there, so you have more of a larger lot compared to some of the other in the village. And I would just hope when these houses are sold that people would come forward and come to our building inspectors and ask what they could do with their property, what's the lot coverage, which obviously not everybody realizes it. That's our code. That's what our law is here. When we have our older homes, they're probably more covered because it was their prior existing non-conforming lots or prior to zoning. But as we've built out, I guess the powers that be at the time decided 30% lot coverage was enough. So the problem is, I understand what you have is beautiful, but now here's the problem. I know the zoning board does give a variance up to 34%. I don't know what does yours come up to? Your coverage, 37.
I guess I'm questioning, where does that 34 number come out? Then why don't we make the lot coverage 34%?
See, and here's what happens. So now if we make 40%, now somebody comes to the board and says, I have 44% lot coverage. So and they could give a variance for that. If it's 40%, they can go to 44 if that's what they think they should do. But then where do we stop? Now is it 50%? So, and you're one case here. And I know there's been a gentleman last year who appeared before the zoning board and wanted a variance for his pool area, or he wanted to put in a pool, and that was denied also. There's been people before that have been denied because of the lot coverage. So you're one parcel, you're one person coming in here asking for that. And I understand why you want to do it. We understand. But so now the board just can't go, okay, let's do 40%. It's a process. We're going to have Dave come up and explain, so we're changing our law, we're changing our code if the board so decides to do that. So it's a process.
Sorry not to.
No, that's okay.
I don't mean to say 40%. That's just 40% is what I've seen around the area. I've seen Scarsdale doing where the house is one lot coverage and then 30% on the rest of the property. So you could come up with whatever you think to
You could do a
make the
sliding
community,
scale too. There's a lot of different things, but
correct. But my concern too is if you don't do something, how many homes are not conforming correctly because they put their pool in, they put their backyard, they did their things, and not knowing, not purposely, but not knowing what the coverage is, and now you're gonna go to them and say, you have to rip that pool out, you have to rip that deck out, you have to rip out that patio.
I will tell you that did happen here in the village on a property on the lake, I want to say about 5 years ago.
I know which property is.
They ran over, and I go back again, any construction, a pool, especially a pool, because electric is involved, there's digging involved, so especially with a pool, you have to have a permit.
Again,
So
and that's why-
at that point, then the building inspector looks at the whole picture also.
Correct, and if you're doing a major project like that, it should have gone to the planning board, it should have gone to the zoning board, and done all that, and they would have assessed it and stopped and done the things. So I think there's things in our code already to protect a shed going in that's too big, concreting your whole backyard. I'm just saying, I think, again, just the consideration of the coverage. And again, if it doesn't get, I'll have to figure out how to, get my property to the 34% that's.
And you know what, I'm just going to say, my other concern is too, I had a situation, and this goes back maybe about 25 years ago when I was a lot more timid and meek, but I had a neighbor next door to me that decided to build a pool, and they elevated the property quite a bit. So to this day, we have an issue with that. So, but I think if it stays in front of the zoning board, and this is up to the board what they want to do, but I think if an applicant comes in front of the zoning board, so we don't just do a blanket 40%, I think if each individual comes in front of the zoning board, then we can eliminate potential flooding issues. We can eliminate potential, because they'll look at the project and say, you know what, you really need to be 10 foot from the side yard. You really, you know what I'm saying?
Agreed, but if you're never going to get over that 34%, because that's what you're not going to ever allow, then people can't develop their homes to where they want to be. That's all I'm saying is,
Okay.
if you're not in a place where you're going to flood, if you're not in a place where you're going to have issues and cause problems to your neighbors, and neighbors actually like your backyard, they actually complimented your backyard, I just don't see where the issue is, and I get it, and that's why I struggle, because I'd rather do the 30% with the variance with reasonable, hey, let's look at this looks good, we like it, 40 is fine, no complaints from the neighbors. The other applicant you discussed had complaints from the neighbors, had issues, had other things, so there are different variables with each application. I don't know if that's spot zoning, or just taking each of the 7 criteria and determining what's right, not what's right, what's appropriate for the community and for that homeowner.
And that property, the size of the property also.
Yeah, but I'm saying for the
yeah.
homeowner who bought it and for the community, that both parties win.
Well, one of the things, when you're talking about the code, that lot coverage code doesn't have a number next to it when it was last revised, correct? And I believe when the zoning came in the 50s, we didn't have sewers. We had septic tanks. So in order to have a leach field that wasn't covered, I believe that's where it came from. I remember 20 years ago or so when I first came on the planning board, I asked some of the older members where some of these codes came from that have never been changed, and that was because of the original inception that we didn't have sewers. Some people still had wells. So that's probably where it came from. That might be why there's no legislative intent where that number comes from. I don't have a problem going to 40% or increasing the lot coverage. I'd also recommend to the board that we'd increase the lot coverage for commercials, because we want to help develop the commercials. The commercials keep telling us that we're not user-friendly to them, and if you drive up and down Route 9, you'll see some of the commercials are already at 100%. So as long as the stormwater management for commercials is met, and the engineering evaluation has taken place, I don't see why we can't go up to 80 or 90%. I believe it's 70% now. But when it comes to coming up, increasing the lot coverage for residentials, I don't see why there should be a problem, because when you develop or go to increase the coverage, you obviously have to come to the planning board and get planning board approval, and that would, the drainage study would be something that should be mandatory through the engineer before the site plan is approved, because nobody wants to flood out their neighbors. Well, some people don't care if they flood out their neighbors, let me put it that way. It's the neighbors who have the issue, and then it becomes an enforcement issue. So I'd like to, don't have a problem increasing the lot coverage, and if the coverage is, development is to take place, obviously, the building department would have to tell the planning board to approve a site plan. You want to say something, Stephanie? Did I make a mistake someplace? Because I was just coming off the top of my head, I'm sorry.
I know, just single-family homes don't come before the planning board. So the planning board wouldn't be seeing a site plan.
Well, the building inspector could request a drainage study, and we could put that into the text amendment. Anything over 30% would require a drainage study from an engineer. And since we're charging residents and commercials the same for our engineering services, there would be no cost to the taxpayer other than the applicant. So I'm sure legislation could be written someplace that would protect the neighbors from undue hardships, undue flooding, increase the property value of the properties we have in the village, thereby increasing the tax revenue and allowing the property owner free reign of his property up to a certain percentage, as long as it doesn't impact anybody else.
Well, it would be good for the extra income. It would be good for the extra income if the people did get permits, because that's how the extra income happens. So I would request that a permit is filed.
Well, a permit has to be filed because it doesn't, listen, we're talking about a law. A law can't be followed unless everybody follows the law. If somebody doesn't want to follow the law, they'll put in a 70% lot coverage.
Well, but this is what we're dealing with at this point, with this case right now. So I would ask that the proper permits that are closed, but there's things that need to be closed out.
Yeah, I'm working with the
please.
building. I'm
Yes.
working with the,
Okay.
I got the electric, I got it all.
Okay, good.
I
That's
got
important.
everybody- I've been pushing it.
Yeah,
It's
people
hard
need to
push.
understand the electric, when we do any construction, it's for your safety too, so no one gets hurt.
Well, I think we're talking
Yeah.
about a bigger issue. We're talking
Yeah.
about the entire village. I'm not saying change the zoning code for Mr. Bacher. There's been many people who've run into the same issue. You mentioned that pool.
Yes.
With that pool, they changed that pool.
I just
They
feel
changed the
bad
site
that was
for
a
it.
no, and now, the board is considering a yes.
Well,
So I
most
feel bad, we've said no to several people before.
now we can
Not me,
reply.
I mean, the zoning.
Because we have seen multiple issues, maybe it's time to change the code to increase the property values to allow the free, not the free reign, but allow people to use their property more efficiently, especially if this code was written because of a situation that no longer exists. Like I said, 20 years ago, I asked, and they said that lot coverage was because of septic tanks. When Indian Point came in, we got sewers. So that law should have been changed. If the majority of the communities surrounding us are well over 30%, maybe we should be following suit. We followed suit with many of our laws from neighboring communities. Maybe this is one example where we should also.
All right, I just don't, just once again, I want to reiterate, I don't want us to start looking like the Bronx or southern Westchester, which everything is
40% takes
covered.
us far away from the Bronx.
Well, we'll see, because now they take this, you know what I'm saying? You see what people are doing? You see what they're doing.
And people do it without permits.
I think the people who live in the Bronx live a certain lifestyle, a certain
Yeah,
way.
but we
And
don't
the
want,
people who
but we
live
don't want
here-
that here. We want to still be small-town USA, we still want to have green space. That's
I don't
important.
understand that like, you don't want people from the Bronx moving.
No, I didn't say that. Please don't.
No, I know, that's what I'm saying, so.
We've had a lot of nice people move here from the Bronx, and they move here because it's not concrete paradise.
Again,
They
so why would
have
they
that,
concrete
that
it?
have that rural.
That's what they
But they're not, because, I don't know, I guess that's going to be up to the village. If they want to have their whole property concreted, and instead of a lawn, they paint the concrete green, I don't know. I just don't think that's a good thing. That's my personal opinion. I've grown up here. People are coming here from all over, from the Bronx, down county. They like the rural area. They like the grass. They like the trees. So I'm not looking for 100% lot coverage. And I just,
I'm not
I don't know.
looking for that either.
Yeah, I don't know where it stops, though. But you know what I'm saying? So that's all, that's my opinion. That's just my opinion. And so we just can't, the board just can't say, okay, fine, going to do 40% now. We just can't do that. It's a process. So it's David, please, could you explain what the process, if the village wants to change the
Can we
code,
just
what
ask
the process
Can I
is?
just ask a simple question here? Just looking in the way that code is written, it says pervious or not. What if we were to just change that, to just include the lot coverage is only impervious, so that anything that is pervious is not included in the lot coverage? And I don't know how that would help homeowners.
No, there's so many different definitions to pervious. So you could put down stone and that could be considered impervious because of how much it compacts, even though it's not
Compaction.
cement. So,
Exactly.
and there are other products that become impervious after many years, and sedimentation and things like that. So that's really.
It becomes a runoff issue, no matter
It's
what.
Yeah.
really difficult to enforce.
So please, if the board would like to, if that's what they would like to do, is to change their, from 30% to 40% coverage. So where, you know what, the board has to decide, is it all the zones throughout the village? Is it just one zone? You know, so what is it? And then if you know, you would have to get back to us, I'm sure, and what that looks like, the process, and what that potentially could cost.
Yes. So, first of all, as a down county resident, I love coming up to Buchanan.
Thank you.
But when my wife and I were looking to buy our house, I said, Fran, I want a yard that I can mow with a weed whacker. So I have and
You have a
that
weed
works for
whacker.
me. It doesn't
Okay.
necessarily
Yeah.
work.
There's a concrete yard. So.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
not
all right,
quite, not
that's,
quite. I have enough yard where the dogs can
Do
roam
their
around
thing.
and do their
Mhm.
business. So anyways, so you have, and I think you raised the issue of lot coverage and what is the impact, and essentially it's runoff. It's stormwater runoff. You mentioned having a drainage report or stormwater management report. In the types of applications that I've been reviewing for other communities, that's the critical issue with respect to lot coverage. It's the impervious surface, and where does that, where does the rainfall go, and how is it handled? That's really the important component to understanding lot coverage. So my suggestion would be, all right, to help you understand what other communities are doing, is to do kind of a sample survey, desktop survey of what other communities are doing, but not just on a kind of the town of Cortland or whatever does it at 40%. Each of these communities has different zoning categories, just like you do. And they have different sizes. You've got your R40, which is 40,000 square feet, 20,000, 15, 10. A lot of these other communities will have similar types of zoning characteristics, zoning classes, and they will have lot coverage as part of that. So my suggestion would be to understand, all right, so what are some of the other comparable communities to Buchanan? What do they have for lot coverage? So at least you have some comparison.
Right.
And whether they're greater or lesser. And then also, I would think it would be helpful to have some input from the building inspector, from the zoning board, and your attorney as to what kinds of, what types of cases have been coming before the ZBA for the granting of these types of requests, and how big is the grant. So you understand, and if the community keeps getting a request for a zoning variance, it means that maybe the zoning isn't quite right, and it maybe needs to be adjusted. So I would start with probably those two components to understand, all right, what does it mean in comparison with what Buchanan has and what other communities have, and that at least provides you with some basis for going forward. And then there are other issues that get quite technical with respect to, like, how do you define pervious versus impervious? And I know Scarsdale has done a very comprehensive evaluation of lot coverage and impervious surface, because they have issues in different parts of the community with flooding. And flooding, just because you're in a low-lying level, the cause actually happens upstream. And so to the extent that you can try and address it upstream before it gets to a problem downstream is really what you're trying to accomplish here. So that would be my suggestion, is before you entertain any specific numbers, is at least have the information before you. So, all right, here's where you're at, here's where other people are at within kind of your local community, and then you have some evaluation that you could, and comparison that you could at least draw from.
Yeah, I could think of around 4 or 5 lot coverage requests, variance requests over just the last year or 2 years. So, and some were commercial, some were residential, some were in larger zones, some were in smaller zones. So it's common, because people want to develop their property.
And I think with the commercial aspect, certainly the commercial property owner has a little different economics, so they can
Well, this
incorporate those
this
types
one
of-
person wanted to put a garage in there, and we told him he couldn't because he would have had to put another parking spot in, and he couldn't do that because of lot coverage. So we're talking about a parking spot, and it was over 3% de minimis. So I think it is a little bit difficult.
So they're all good questions and issues that you're raising.
All right. So we'll do that first. We'll look at the comparison. And then there's like this, and then after that, say we compare it to Town of Cortland. Say we
Right.
could do that. I think there's, I think in the town, I don't think it's a flat 50%. I think there's some type of a sliding scale. So, you know.
And you're right, there are different approaches. They may be, depending on the size of the lot, they may have a sliding scale as far as the coverage, or they may just do it, other communities may do it just by zone. If you're in an R40 zone, here's what your coverage is, regardless of the size of your lot.
Do you know what zone you're in on Valerie Court?
Half an acre.
Half acre? All right. Okay.
I'm definitely interested in having a conversation about this. I think it's important for the residents that we do really research this and move forward with some kind of a change. Sean did bring up a point that there was septic systems involved years ago. Obviously, that's why this was put in place. And the runoff is the most important part of this. And everything's got to go before the building department anyway. So, I mean, if an engineered system of water containment is in place, then I think it's suitable.
And I hope the people who've done this without permits will come forward and get that resolved. Because remember, when you go to sell your house, you're going to have to do it anyhow.
Well, I don't think they'll be in hiding anymore if we make it
Could be.
legitimate.
I just, and I always wonder when the houses are sold here, because you see people doing different things and they get themselves jammed up. And you kind of we started something, the ladies in the office had like a welcome to Buchanan thing. And I think we need to really, when somebody comes in the village, to say, any type of building or whatever you're doing, please, here's the building inspector number, please call. Because, it gets scary when they start doing electrical stuff and things like that, because it gets dangerous. If it's not done properly, somebody's going to get hurt.
I think that goes for every town now.
Yeah, so maybe
Everybody's just
maybe
trying
we
to
could
fly
be.
under the radar.
Yeah, I guess. So, if that's, we'll start with the comparison. We have to have a public hearing. So this is not going to, if the board does decide, it's not going to happen overnight. It's a process.
Yeah, but procedurally, so we would come back, we would have this discussion on what the values are as far as the coverage, and then you would put together a game plan. All right, are we going to revise the bulk table? Are we going to revise definitions in the code? And then you would have a public hearing. You'd have to go through the environmental review process as well. You'd prepare an environmental assessment form. You'd have a public hearing. The public would be able to weigh in. So there's, by no means has there been any course set at this point. You still need to have that public hearing process, the public input process before you make a decision.
And at some point, I'd like to get an estimate on what something like that would cost.
Yes, I'll work with Mr. Sewell.
Yeah. Is there any way to adjust this with no cost? Or is it, say the adjust the code, any way to adjust it in the reading of the code, to make an adjustment to it, that there's no cost to the village?
Well,
But all these studies and everything else, I mean, did you go through the code yourself, or you're not aware of our code?
I've reviewed your code.
Yeah.
But I have not done any type of survey work looking at other communities. So that would be part of my work effort on behalf of you to give you the information.
Okay. Not. I know your cost, but I'm just saying with all the reviews and everything. So you'll do all the reviews yourself. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, as far as the drafting of revisions and, yes, the environmental assessment form, yes, that would come through our office.
All right.
On behalf of the village.
So would that be a long form or a short form?
For something like this, you could probably do the short form because you're not affecting like land use over 25 acres.
Yeah, we're not changing the use, we're just changing it.
You're changing
the
specific.
use.
Yeah.
Well, we're not, the
Okay.
type, I should
Yeah.
say.
Do you have a monetary figure off the top of your head, like usually what something like this would cost, or you don't know until you actually
I
dig
think you
into
would
it
have
and start
to, I
doing
think if this
surveys?
is gonna happen, it would have to be the whole village, because you can't just do one zone, and then Joe Schmo in R15 says, well, how come I can't, so it just
You would-
blossoms.
You would want to do this, my suggestion would be, you would
Okay.
want to do this for each of the districts that you have.
Each of the districts.
Because you have not just the residential, but I think you've raised
Right.
concerns about
Commercial.
the commercial as well.
Well, the commercial is already a different lot coverage than residential.
Yeah. But right now, if it's at one point and the community thinks, no, you know what, in order to make it more user-friendly, you should bump it up, then you should have some basis for bumping it up, that's all.
But another way to save costs, we could do our research, because all of these codes within our neighboring communities are online, so everybody can push the same button and say, just like Harmon did, he pulled out six or seven different communities, and it's right there. We don't always have to pay somebody to
No,
do our own research.
You could do that, too.
Bring up a good point.
All right, so we gotta,
Maybe that's what I was trying to get at you.
yeah,
You trying to get it out of me?
Well, so it's out of somebody.
there you go.
He's not gonna say that, though.
And then eventually, we will get to the rezoning of the Indian Point property again.
Yes.
We'll get back to that.
Yep.
That's important also. Okay, any other questions, any other comments, any concerns?
Gary's got a question.
Gary Bell, Chairman of the Zoning Board. There you go, come on up.
He's going to do it, or what do you want?
No, I guess the board wants to do the research, and then they can come back with
No,
their
he's going to put
findings.
together some monetary.
Well,
Yeah, we didn't say that. We want him to put together an estimate.
Yeah, but then yeah, it's a process.
We could put together an estimate of what it's gonna cost us before we move forward.
Hi, Gary Bell.
Good evening, Mayor, Board.
Hey, Gary.
Our zoning board has been talking about this for a while, and we certainly feel there's a need to expand block coverage. Going back to a couple of things that were said, people did things without, and we believe that because we've ridden around and checked a few places. So other than aerial coverage to find out who did what and whatever, I can't say he did something or he did something. I don't know. But that's one way. The other thing is, you want to change the lot coverage. Marcus was so graciously nice to me and sent me a 100-page new document for the new zoning book for the new code. So I read 20 pages. There's a long way to go with this, to be honest with you. So my suggestion is, in Mr. Bacher's case, is that we can just hold him over until that's done. Because when we do this code over, there might be a change where he might not even have to do anything. I think that's only fair.
We're not asking him to do anything right now. It's
I
on
wouldn't say
hold.
that about anybody. I
Yeah.
mean,
You're just trying to be fair.
and Teresa was right about, we turned somebody down up on Cortlandt Street because they already raised their property about a foot up. They had a water abatement system installed underneath, and they were already over. They already had a variance, and they wanted to go from 34 up to 43? 43 or some crazy number, and we didn't approve that.
Yeah,
We-
it's
we
over
just-
40.
We just couldn't do that. But there's certainly room for people to be able to build onto their houses. It used to be, if you're in the footprint of the house, you could go up, but now you could be able to move, to build out the side of your house. The last thing I just want to say is, everybody remember the maroon book for code? Anybody? Okay, so the blue book came into effect in 1980. And I know this because I happened to be sitting on a committee that we were involved, 3 boards, and we went through the code page by page once a month. I think you might remember that.
No, the 80s, I wasn't,
Well,
I wasn't.
It was a tedious, long,
Well, that's what
drawn-out
we're
thing,
doing now,
but
too.
I
Yeah,
understand
yeah,
that.
yeah.
That's why I'd like to get more of this code read to understand what I'm going to talk about here before we just do something for,
Yeah.
That's my opinion anyway. Of course, it's certainly up to you guys.
Thank you.
And, you know, I think in the
Thank you.
future, I've got to speak to the planning and the zoning board. So as you're seeing, like, issues come along, you have 20 people in a year that, you know, are asking for variances or for something, or the planning board something, you know, if they could please just, you know, write a letter to the board and kind of keep us in the loop of, you know.
I've reached out to the chairman of the planning board to set up a time when our boards could get together and start talking about this, so we could give you guys some better input. You're the people
that would
who
be
vote
great.
on it. So,
Yeah, no, that
you
would be
know,
great.
yeah, because, you know, and I haven't, to be honest with you, I haven't heard back from him yet. I don't know if he's away or not, but I'll give a follow-up call tomorrow, so.
All right, good.
Trying to
But
get
Garrett,
that
thank you for your input tonight.
problem.
Because it's-
Thank
it-
Thanks, Barry.
Can I make one more comment?
Sure.
I actually think a lot of people have done the work to their house, as I said. I think it might be good to, in the newsletter, hey, I don't think most people even know what lot coverage is. They're just gonna put the patio in their backyard saying it's just a patio, no electric, no nothing. They're gonna put that gravel in their backyard and say, why do I need a permit for that? Is there anything in the code besides lot coverage that would require a permit? Maybe something in the newsletter or something, maybe working with the building inspector, having the top 5 code violations or violations that occurred, saying, hey, just remember, for lot variance, you need 30%. If you're putting this in, just a suggestion, because I think people moving into this neighborhood might have come from a 40% coverage and said, hey, 40%'s the number. You know, if you have a contractor, 40%'s the number, so just.
That's those Bronx people, I think.
Portland.
Yeah.
People coming from
And
Portland
I
have moved here.
think maybe we need to do a survey to see what the interest is, too. You know, like you had mentioned a desktop type of survey, but,
A survey for changing the coverage?
yeah.
We could have that during a public hearing.
Yeah, but I'm saying,
People
you
who have
know.
an issue with it, they come in and talk to us.
Yep. So,
I think-
Stephanie, yes, please.
I kind of agree. I've seen through zoning and planning, people come in and they honestly didn't know and they don't know.
Yeah.
Some of it, you know, would come from your attorney at closing, right? They would tell you, hey, you know, you haven't assessed the apartment, there's a law. But nobody's teaching them all about
No.
this as you move in.
No.
And most people don't know. So I don't know how you would do that.
That's
Am I
that
in
that
newsletter?
welcome packet thing that Cindy and Sharon had worked on. And I think we just have to get better at tuning that up. They did a great job, but to tune it up. Yeah.
Listen, it just happened to me. We just redid our driveway, just repaved what was there, took out the existing, put new in. I see a note on my door, call me as soon as, it's, you know. So I called Brian and Peter and, you know, lo
Even
and
if
behold,
it's
I didn't know I had a
simple-
poll permit, so, you know.
Even if it's as simple as reminding people before you do much or anything, why don't
Yeah,
you give the
please
building
contact-
inspector a
sure.
call? 'Cause they're not
Right.
going to read our code,
Right.
right?
No.
Right.
But if they give our building inspector a call and just say, hey, I'm doing my driveway or whatever, he'll tell you, oh, come on in or not.
So
I do think most people
let's
don't.
bring this back into the main issue. So we have 2 questions. One is answered, he's going to give us some cost estimates to do his research. The other one is, how do we hold anybody currently in violation of lot coverage? How do we hold them in abeyance until we decide this issue?
You just have to put it on hold. I mean, we're
Well,
not
do we
gonna-
need some legal document? Because Harmon might not be the only person. There might be other people that come in. So do we have to write something up, or can the mayor or the administrator instruct the building department to hold all lot coverage issues in abeyance until final determination of a potential zoning change takes place?
Are there any open violations like that, Peter? Do you know?
No.
Okay, so hold that.
Well, no, if something
Not
comes
from
up,
me,
you don't know what's
that's
gonna
from you
happen. You don't know what's gonna happen tomorrow or in 2 weeks or in 3 months, because at a minimum, this is a 3-month process.
Right, so he shouldn't be looking to violate. people.
Yeah, so we don't, if something comes up next month, we don't want somebody in violation for 2 or 3 months incurring fines daily. You know, so if somebody send them a letter, direct the building
We haven't
department to do
done,
something.
we
because-
haven't, Peter hasn't, would you like to come up to
I said-
speak
I
for a
know
minute?
he hasn't,
No,
but
that's
let's-
not what he means.
That's not what I'm
He wants
saying.
you guys to direct him.
Yeah, but he hasn't anyhow, he's waiting for people to comply. Because there's one person he's working with that has not filed any permits, and he's waiting for that person to comply.
No, I think.
So there's been a conversation.
No, I think what Trustee Murray's saying, that I can write a letter to the building inspector.
Sure.
Pending this process,
Yeah.
that if it comes across anybody, that's unbanned, just like kind of police officer, hold off and give a
That's
ticket
it.
until you finish.
But that makes
So
sense,
just so it's
because
on.
we're,
Yeah.
I'll take
that makes
care of
sense
Something
because we're in the
formalized so that
process. We're
nobody can
working
just so
on
it's on
it.
there.
We're working
I'll
on
do
it.
that first thing tomorrow.
Please, thank you. Yeah,
Thank you,
that's
Mark.
all.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, Peter doesn't want to say anything. Anybody else on the board would like to comment on that? Anybody in the audience would like to comment? No? Okay. All right, so it's in the process. The next item is discussion on the 25-mile-per-hour road limit, and I know trustee, I'm so
The
sorry.
governor has not yet signed it. It's
No,
passed
of
the
course
Assembly
not.
and the Senate, so.
We had to wait for our legislation until December 31st, so it's not on that. But, you know, just.
You can
just
think
have-
about it, I mean,
Yes.
and figure out if
Yeah.
that's what you want to do.
Thank you, David.
Thank you,
Thank you.
David.
Have a
Thanks,
good
David.
night. Thanks for coming.
And the only thing I want to make clear, it will not affect the state road.
State
So
road.
Route 9A will not.
Right,
be
Right,
Route 9A, yeah,
correct.
right.
Okay.
State road.
That's what that-
So, all right.
There's no point in writing a local law that
Right.
we can't do.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
So that, just to review this, I know trustee Capicati wanted to lower the speed limit from 30 to 25. The State Assembly and Senate have passed a bill, A1007A, to authorize local municipalities to adopt local laws to reduce the speed limit to 25. So as Stephanie has mentioned, the governor has not signed it yet. So that's in limbo too. All right.
Well, I did receive an email, we all did, from Shane, who did some data work.
Yeah, he did the traffic study on
He did the
Seward.
traffic study on Seward, which was one of the biggest complaints, and, I mean, it was minimal, like, oh, what the?
I think the average, you said, was 22 miles an hour with
Yeah.
some perturbations up to 35.
Yep.
Yeah, and there was 14 cars out of 6,000 or something that were over 40 miles an hour.
I think it's the time of day too, a lot.
Yeah, see,
Especially there.
this is where we come into a perception versus data.
Yep.
Somebody sees cars speeding a couple of times in a month, they say there's a big speeding problem. But when we have an analysis of over 6,000 vehicles with the average speed at 22 miles per hour, it really doesn't show, there's always going to be a perturbation of a high speed, low speed, but with an average of 22, I think I think it's pretty good.
No, it was like 99% lower than 40 miles an hour.
Yeah.
99.7% was
Yeah.
lower than 40 miles an hour. Harmon.
So it's good. It's good to have those little speed, little detectors.
So I have a question on that data. Do you have the data during time periods?
No,
Well,
it's
that's what I
constant.
said to Sean.
296
It's
hours.
constant.
So there's no way to get data between 7 a.m. and 9 a.m.?
There may be, I don't know
think
what the,
there is. I think
there is
there's-
logic in that,
Because that's when the kids are out, that's when,
Well, that's when
kids are
school's
coming home, that's when
coming,
people are going to work,
Yeah.
flying through. That's when you're getting passed by some guy who has to get to work because you just dropped your kids off. Happened a number of times to me, so just.
I believe there is. I believe, we had gotten these from Holtec. They gave them to us. So I think what the chief had said, they can see the different time frames of like, so from 1 to 2, there were 2 cars that were whatever. So they can see when it's the worst time. So there's 30 cars that came through and they were all speeding from 2 to 4. So at least they can put their resources to those times.
To be honest, if somebody's speeding from midnight to 2 in the morning, I care, but I don't really care. It's 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. when my kids are by the bus
Yeah, when the
stop.
kids are out, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
walking.
Well, quite honestly,
Yeah, it was-
the stop signs are worse than the speeding, I think, at times. I see people just go right through
I
stop
think the
signs.
data was on, it was 290 or 300 hours, something like that. Continuous running time, right? Was that how it was?
Yeah, but as Harmon said, you can break that down into different
Absolutely.
times, and that's how resources can be allocated for code,
No,
for
it
speed
should be.
enforcement.
There's got to be a way to break it
Yeah,
down.
no, I'm sure they had the
Yeah.
logic to that.
Yeah.
They used to give us those reports all the time.
Right, but, all right,
Okay.
so we're in limbo with that.
We done?
Any comments from the board on anything else?
Yeah, I have one thing. I got the email from you, Marcus, about Journal News.
Yes.
Why would our residents have to call a newspaper to tell them to stop littering? Why don't we just send them summonses or have them give papers and garbage to people who subscribe? Why do our people have to tell them, stop throwing stuff on my lawn?
All I'm saying is, they were saying there's a bunch of people that do want to receive them.
That's fine, let them subscribe.
And they say that if anybody does not want to receive one, to just send them an email and they'll take them off the list. So if the board wants to issue.
This has been an issue for.
If the village board wants to give littering tickets to everybody that,
You know what?
I don't know how we're gonna do this.
This has been, I can go back 30 years, honest to God, I can go back 30 years, and there were people that were so angry, they would just throw them out in the road, which wasn't the answer either. But one of the ways to resolve it, you know, and we had spoken about it, is just have them, whatever,
Drop off a supply to the
drop off
village hall,
whatever.
and if people
We'll
want
have a
them,
container there, they want it, let them come
Come
pick it
get 'em.
up. So, no more dropping in the village at all.
just like the penny saver used to
Yeah.
leave a supply at the A&P.
But if somebody has a subscription to Journal News, they have to get, I mean, you have to go pick your paper
I
up
asked that
somewhere?
question, they do not want to leave anything in a box. They say
Well, then they
people
don't
like
leave
to listen.
anything, but then that hurts the
But
people
most-
that really want to get that,
Most
you know?
of this is junk,
It's a promotion.
it's
Listen,
coupons.
they're
and
coupons, some
Coupons,
people
yeah.
like the coupons.
They get caught in snow blowers, that's all they do.
Not all the time, in the winter.
Yeah, in the wintertime, it's the worst.
winter.
Yeah.
In the winter.
That's all they do.
I'm still
I mean, it's up to
confused.
the board.
Do we have the authority to give littering tickets?
I like to get it, I don't know.
I'm confused. When you called them, they said these people were on the list, that's why it's being delivered?
They said they have a list of people that received them.
So these people subscribed?
I don't believe that.
No.
I think they just
I
told
don't
us.
believe that.
So they lied to you?
Oh, I believe so, yes.
I believe.
So we find them then. They're violating our law. If somebody wants a newspaper, they subscribe to it, right? You don't throw it in the street.
So we need to, as far as I know, I'm not a lawyer, we need to find out, somebody has to file a complaint of who received them.
Is that junk that gets the coupons and stuff, is that distributed by the Journal News?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, it's
All
the,
that's
it's
distributed
the
by the
River,
Journal News?
what's it called, River Journal or whatever, it's a little.
Well, not River Journal.
No, not River, it's whatever it's called.
Journal
Yeah,
Express.
Journal
Yeah,
Express.
the
It's
Express.
the Journal
not
News is
coupons.
free.
It's
It
not
comes out on
coupon.
Wednesdays, usually.
No, it's a little promotional
It's getting hot
newspaper.
in here.
Right.
There's a lot of hot air.
That's part of the Journal News, but it's, you know, they put a couple stories.
Oh, it's separate, I don't want the heat.
It's separate.
Yeah, and all they do
Yeah,
is they
it's
just go
separate
around
paper.
throwing everybody's driveway.
Yeah, usually on
Half of the time, it
Wednesday,
doesn't even
they come
reach
through.
I don't
Every-
No?
Just tell them they can't do it anymore.
Huh.
That don't want it.
I don't get them. I mean, I used
They
to get
probably
these
just don't go
Anybody
there.
else
in a
have
yellow
comments?
bag,
I
they
don't
used to
get
come.
Yeah. I get them in
Years
my house,
ago.
I get them in my house too. I just throw them in the garbage every time.
So they're not interested in leaving, which is kind of stupid with the price of gas, to just leaving a bulk in one place. That doesn't make any sense either. That would be easier for them. Think about it, they don't have to go up and down every street. Just boop, you know, you want it, you come and get it. I don't know, up to the board.
Send them a letter and ask them to stop
Dispersing
dispersing them throughout the community, that's all.
See if that works. Okay, Steph.
So where are we at with that? We're good?
We'll take care of it.
You're gonna take care of it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, the only other thing I wanted to discuss, I was discussing with another elected official, I'd like to look at the solar. We did a while back with NYSERDA, it's probably over 10 years ago, and it didn't work for us in the building here. But I'd like to look at the potential of seeing if we can get any grants for solar for the highway, the village, and the sewer treatment plant, to see if there's any grants that are out there.
I haven't seen any.
Okay, all right, but, you know, they were talking, they saved quite a bit of money, so. And
Who got the grants? I can give them a call.
down in White Plains,
You gotta see that facility.
I bet, so.
The
you
solar
know,
facility in White Plains?
Yeah, beautiful, huh?
I have one other thing too.
Okay, and then.
It's not beautiful, but
It's a big facility.
it's a big
It's
facility.
Gigantamundo?
It's an eyesore, actually.
Oh, okay, well, this would be on top of our building, so we wouldn't.
That's not bad.
Yeah, we wouldn't see that.
So the mayor's office in White Plains, was that one?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
The other thing is, on Sunday, July 3rd at dusk, there'll be fireworks in Peekskill. So just to let everyone know, the Lens Cove area will be open, so if you want to see the fireworks in Peekskill, come down. Don't come at 9 o'clock. Try to get there while it's still light. Bring a flashlight.
What time are the fireworks?
They're at dusk, so like 9, 10, 9, yeah, you need to see fireworks, never mind.
I'll be on the barge.
Oh, you'll be on a barge?
I'm
on
doing
Sunday?
it.
Oh, you're doing it?
Yeah.
Well, you
Yeah,
should
that's
invite
cool.
us. I didn't know that. So you're doing Peekskill's fireworks. So why am I announcing this?
I don't know. You didn't ask me.
We go to Lents Cove, so we have a group of people that go to Lents Cove. So just to let the village residents know, if they want to see the fireworks in Peekskill, then come to Lents Cove, they'll be able to see it.
Fireworks?
Kenny?
Jeez,
Kenny makes pizzas and puts up fences.
Yeah.
Kenny's
Puts
a fence guy.
Puts a fence around the sand.
Can I go?
Yes, Dan, what do you have? for us?
Actually, 2 items. I just want to commend our fire department. There was an electrical fire at a house, one of my neighbors, a week and a half ago, and they did a phenomenal job, and I just wanted to put that out there. And also, I'm going to keep asking the same question because it just drives me crazy. The house that's been abandoned for 20 to 30 years on Bannon Avenue, the town needs to do something. Let's try and push this along and move it along and do what we got to do to either have them sell it, whatever they got to, whatever they can do. It's an eyesore. It's been an eyesore for too long.
I don't think it's salvageable at this point.
Yeah, maybe not. Yeah, who knows now?
That's it.
I'm meeting with the town tomorrow, and I will come back with a report from the board. The town attorney will be there, so I will come back with an answer to that for you.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Steve, Sean?
Yep.
Everybody's good? Any comments, questions from the audience? Eileen, in person?
Yeah, maybe the last time.
Oh, you didn't have fun here tonight? Come on.
No, and there's something wrong with this.
Oh, it's not, oh.
Because you can't hear it back there.
Oh,
Harm
okay.
and I could hear, but the other ones, they speak like Stephanie. Quiet.
Wow, she bashed you. She bashed you.
I'm ashamed when you're talking with that voice. All right, do we have enough money in the budget for the gas increases and the police cars?
Yeah.
If we didn't, where would that come from? The highway department? Okay, all right. We've got a bunch of dirt bikers on Tate Avenue. 4-wheel drivers, 2-wheel drivers, right across the street with the chickens.
Oh
So I don't know what else to say. In fact, I don't even know if the chickens are still there. They were on the other property, then they walked back to the other property, so they they travel.
We are allowed to have some chickens here in the code.
No,
our
I'm
code.
not complaining
Yeah.
about the chickens.
They don't wake
just
you up, do
saying
they?
that the dirt bikers are really they're on the property across the street, the old Wiesner property, and they're fine. They've got a lot of land. You know, they've got enough land to go there, but the kids are on the street. 4-wheelers, ATVs, the dirt bike kids, and I feel sorry for them because, you know, I know they're having a good time, and they must have about 6 of those bikers over there all the time, going back and forth. The third thing is, what happened with the property, since we were thinking about properties here today, the property on White Street and Albany Post Road that had a lien on it, you got the house demolished. Did it go to the town, even though it's in the village?
I don't know if that was ever pulled for a foreclosure, because that's just way above and beyond. That's between the lien from the nursing home, now you have the school, town, village taxes.
How long do those liens stay on before they don't go away?
They don't go away.
They don't go away. So that property is null and void for the village?
I mean, what could you sell? It's not even, I wouldn't even think it's a half acre. Yeah, it's a big social services lien. It's not even like a half acre, so even if it could be sold, just let me throw a number out. 30,000? I don't know, I'm just throwing a number out. So that's nowhere near covering. So social services would have to compromise and just wash their hands of it. I think we did ask them, and nope. So it's probably good $300,000 of easily.
Because that's just another little piece of property.
Yeah.
That's a potential of nothingness. All right, thank you.
All right, thanks, Eileen. All right, we don't have anything for executive session this evening, so I'd like to make a motion.
Sorry, Mayor,
I'm sorry, something else?
I refresh my memory. Who's Eric Romano?
The new police officer.
Police officer.
Oh, son of a bitch. I got you. All right, thanks, Jackie.
Yeah, yeah. That's okay, I had to think about it too when I saw the name, I was like, okay.
Romeo, sorry, yeah, I got
Yeah,
you. My mistake. Wow, that's weird.
Okay, on a motion to close the meeting, can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thanks everyone for coming.